Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Chapter 71. Barriers Between People. Ichigo awoke suddenly, breathing in sharply for a few moments while he registered his surroundings once more. Sleep had been a long time coming since the previous night's revelation, and what sleep he did have was interrupted by nightmares. The one he'd just woken from had been rather disturbing. Ichigo massaged his eyes with his knuckles, trying to rid himself of the lingering remnants of the dreams. Rubbing his eyes wasn't enough. Ichigo shook his head, trying to banish the images that had persisted beyond the ending of sleep. He knew why his sleep had been restless. The knowledge that he could go to hell for acting on something as inherently good as wanting to protect his family. It was a tough idea to swallow. At what point was he supposed to stop? If people continued to threaten his family, was he supposed to just let it happen? His face hardened. No, if it was within his power, he would always protect those he held dear. But he wouldn't kill the innocent to do it. That was his limit. That was the difference between himself and Zuni. His family wouldn't want their lives to be at the expense of others. If he went to hell anyway, then, well, he'd cross that bridge when he came to it. Hopefully it wouldn't come to that. Determination renewed, Ichigo swiftly dressed and headed to the training area. He would master sealing. He would defeat hell. He would rescue his mother. And he would let nothing stop him. Ichigo stalked into the training area and absently noted that no one was in yet. That was fine. It just gave him some much appreciated privacy while he worked with his sealing. He was getting a lot better at binding, but he still remembered the key principle of seals. They were powered by the sealed. Thus far, he'd never managed to actually guide Suki's power into maintaining any of his own spells. He frowned for a moment. No wonder the masters of sealing were few and far between. He needed a test subject. Don't tell me you've forgotten about us, King. You need to practice your seals in the middle of battle, too, and you owe me a good fight. Silently acknowledging the point, Ichigo sat in a corner of the room and pushed himself into his inner world, opening his eyes to see the current state of his soul. The sun shone bright, almost too bright, but the heat was not comforting. No, this was an intense heat, one that threatened to burn. The metal of the skyscrapers gave off visible haze from the heat. What was causing this? Hot, ain't it? Cazador asked from right behind him. That's your fault. The more single-mindedly focused you are about something, the hotter and brighter it gets. Ah, that made sense, in a way. If someone's focus became too intent, too narrow, it could blind that person to everything else around him and lead to his own destruction. Strange, though, that such a concept would be reflected within his own soul. Even so, Ichigo merely nodded and turned around. Well then, shall we? Cazador smirked and leapt back, drawing his version of Zangetsu. Don't think I'm gonna take it easy on ya. Never crossed my mind. Ichigo drew his Zanpakuto and began gathering his power, shaping his intent. Let's go. Koten Zanshin. And just like that, another Togabito died. A moment later, the portal back to hell opened and sucked the corpse through. Inoue sat back down and sighed. They just keep coming, she complained. Don't they know it's pointless by now? Chad, who was sitting nearby, shook his head. There's definitely a point. But what could it be? They're not like hollows. They don't need to feed on souls. They're not tiring us out anymore, not since we set up the rest rotation. They're not strong enough to kill us, Inoue pointed out. Her companion fell quiet, and Inoue sighed once more. Her stomach growled audibly, and she blushed. We haven't eaten in a while, she said quietly. I'm going to get something to eat. Do you want anything? Chad blinked and considered for a moment. A couple of tomatoes, please. Inoue smiled brightly. All right, Sato-kun, I'll be back in a few minutes. Chad nodded, declining to comment on Inoue's smile. She was obviously disturbed by the Togabito's apparent suicidal tendencies. He felt similarly. Enough time had passed that Hell had to know that this strategy wasn't exhausting them. What possible purpose did Hell have, continuing to send his soldiers here to die? Unless, Hell's goal could only be accomplished through the repeated death of Togabito in the living world. He frowned pensively, then tapped his ear. Yoruichi. I'm here, Sato, she responded over the communication device in his ear. What's on your mind? When Shinigami and hollows die, their bodies decompose into reishi, and are incorporated into the environment, right? Yes, the goddess of Flash confirmed. Most of the reishi follows the soul to whatever plane it ends up in, but some is left behind. What about the Togabito? Are they leaving behind reishi when we kill them? That's a very good question. Kazuki, the distracted voice of Urahara questioned. Yoruichi repeated the question. Yes, Togabito leaves some reishi behind, markedly more than hollows do in fact. More? Chad asked. Most of it has to do with the portal that opens every time to reclaim their soul. It opens, and some of the reishi from the hell dimension leaks into the living world. Isn't that dangerous? The gentle giant questioned. Only to those in the immediate area, and only for a very short time, Urahara reassured him. The reishi disperses quickly, integrating with the reishi already present in the living world. Reishi is nothing if not adaptable. Given time, the reishi from the hell dimension will take on the same properties as that from the living world. A terrible idea was beginning to take form within Chad's head. He prayed it wasn't true. But doesn't the living world have less reishi than the other worlds? Oh yes. Hawako Mundo, Soul Society, the Dongai, even hell are all made up completely of reishi. The concentration of reishi in living world is tiny by comparison. Urahara's voice was beginning to sound interested. Why are you asking? Togabito have been coming in every hour, in several places of high reishi content, for more than a day. I don't know how much reishi each Togabito leaves behind when it dies, but that's a lot of Togabito, hitting the same spots over and over. Chad took a breath. Is it possible that instead of the hell reishi taking on the living world's properties, the living world's reishi might start to take on hell's properties? There was dead silence for several seconds, before Chad heard a furious clacking at a keyboard. Neither Yoruichi nor Chad dared to say a word while Urahara worked. A full minute passed, then two, with Urahara muttering about variables and spiritual resonances. Then, finally, they heard a sigh. Yes, Sato-kun, I'm afraid that yes, it is possible, and it is happening. Right now, the effects are nearly unnoticeable, and will reverse themselves given a week or two. But if hell continues to send his Togabito, then eventually the reishi Karakura will completely resonate with the reishi of hell. And what will happen then, Kazuki? Yoruichi snapped. The resonance would allow for the hell dimension to connect to Karakura directly through the weakened dimensional borders. What about the Dongai protection? Chad asked. You're positioning it between hell and the living world to protect us, right? Yes, it will be in place in another few hours. And it will help somewhat, but the effect is countered by the fact that the reishi in Karakura has already begun to take on hell's properties. Explain. Do you have any understanding of inter- and extra-dimensional physics, or the effects of time-space distortion on them? No, Yoruichi admitted reluctantly. How about the mechanics of spiritual resonance? What actually happens when you rip a hole in a dimension? No. Then there's no way any explanation I can give will make any sense to you. You'll just have to trust me. I am forwarding my findings to Soul Society so we can figure out what to do from here in the time we have left. Chad swallowed. What happens when full resonance happens? He asked simply. Well, I'd guess that the gates of hell would materialize here, and never disappear. It'd be a permanent portal between hell and the living world. Togabito would be able to invade unendingly, further accelerating the conversion of the rest of the living world reishi. Eventually, the living world would be subsumed into the rest of the hell dimension. Chad's mouth went dry. How long? Yoruichi asked quietly. Given the rate of conversion and assuming that hell doesn't pick up the pace, approximately 26 hours until full resonance. Just over 1 day, a single day to avert the apocalypse. Chad rubbed his forehead, vaguely registering Inoue's return. A mere 26 hours, and there was absolutely nothing Chad could do to improve their chances. All he could do was sit here and continue to eliminate the Togabito who crossed over into the living world, knowing that with each one they defeated, the world grew that much closer to disaster. Inoue quietly took the tomatoes out of her bag and set their container next to Chad, who absently nodded and thanked her. Then a thought occurred to him. He may not have anything he could do to improve their chances. But she might. Inoue. Oh, I like the way you think, Sato-kun. It's worth a try, Yoruichi agreed. I'm patching her in now. And so Urahara and Yoruichi explained everything. Inoue paled, but nodded at once. I'll try to reject the changes, she promised. You'll have to move quickly, Urahara warned. The reishi spreads out very quickly once the portal vanishes. Right. It was an astonishing thought, that they were relying on her and her alone, not merely for healing those who would save the world, but to actually keep the world safe herself until the source of the problem could be dealt with. She never would have dreamed of it before. I'll do my best. Karen was in a very foul mood. She still couldn't leave the house, she was bored beyond belief, and she was in no mood to be in the company of the spoiled princess who had taken up residence with them. Worst of all, she kept hearing Khan's words from the night before. That strong desire, that constant sense of indignation you feel, that quiet resentment you nurture. You need to resolve the emotions that are making your power so reactive. Can you see it now, Karen? Your selfishness. Karen grit her teeth in frustration. Damn it, she wasn't being selfish. Just because she wanted to be out there helping didn't make her selfish. That was practically the definition of selfless. If she were selfish, then she would be just like that Kasumioji girl, who seemed perfectly content to let her personal guards fight on her behalf with a care in the world. If she were selfish, then she wouldn't mind knowing that she didn't have to fight, that she didn't have to go to school or anything. Karen resisted the urge to kick a wall in frustration. She was making herself angrier, which was practically the opposite of Khan's advice, and sure enough she could feel her Raryoku trying to activate her eyes again. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly, trying to calm down. Are you well? Just what she needed. Karen turned around to see the blonde girl, Kasumioji Rurochio, looking at her with mild concern. I'm fine. Rurochio looked at her, clearly not believing her. Something is clearly bothering you. Tell us. It's nothing that concerns you. Karen was struggling now to control her anger. The sight of Rurochio had been irritating the night before, but after her talk with Khan, Karen just couldn't deal with her right then. Very well, we shall leave you to your anger. She turned around and was beginning to walk away when Karen lost the fight with her Raryoku. The eyes of the oracle opened. The flash of Reiatsu startled Rurochio into turning around, and Karen saw the truth. What is that? Rurochio stuttered. Karen's eyes returned to normal. Karen couldn't muster up the will to be angry anymore, not after having seen Rurochio for exactly who she was. I'm sorry, she muttered. Rurochio drew herself up to her full height, which wasn't much, and huffed. Tell us, what did you do? I saw who you are, Karen explained quietly, looking down. My eyes allow me to see the truth of people. I'm sorry, I had no right to look upon you with those eyes. And what did you see? Karen took a deep breath. I saw how you really feel. You can't see how any of this is going to end well. You're scared, and doing your best to hide it by purposely pushing others away. You truly care about your guards, and even now you're hoping that they're still safe. You're under a lot of stress right now and you're trying to stay strong for them so they don't have to worry about you when they go out to fight, she told the heiress softly. It would break you if they failed to come back. You came down here because you couldn't stand staying in your room anymore, because the minute they get home you want to reassure them that you're safe so they can rest. Rurochio stepped back, a look of shock breaking through the mask. How can you know all that about us? My eyes see a lot more than what's on the outside, Rurochio. I see the truth. Nodding to herself, Karen made a snap decision. I'm sorry for snapping earlier. You're right, I am bothered about something. I'm angry because I'm having trouble controlling my power, and the person I asked for advice told me something I didn't like to hear. He called me selfish. The change in subject seemed to have done as intended. The heat in Rurochio's cheeks dimmed, and while she was still clearly disturbed, she seemed more than willing to remove the focus from herself. Why did he say such a thing? She asked. He said that my problems controlling my power come from my wanting to help the others fight, from resenting being helpless. We see. Rurochio paused, clearly weighing her words. Then, we must agree. Karen stared at her, not believing her ears. What? We must agree that you are being selfish, Kurosaki Karen. While the desire to become strong is something to admire, there come times where we must trust those with the strength to do what we cannot. I want to help. I don't want to be a burden to them. And yet a burden is exactly what you will be should you try to help. The most you can do is make yourself as small a burden as possible. Karen felt disgusted with herself. How could she have expected this girl to understand? Her eyes had revealed the girl's emotions and motivations, and it had been made very clear that Rurochio was no fighter at heart. That's the most you can do, Kasumioji Rurochio. Yes, Rurochio admitted without missing a beat. You have seen our soul, Kurosaki Karen. You know how we worry for Kenryu. Yet if we were to insist on being with them, our presence would only hinder them. Rurochio's facade cracked a bit, and even without the eyes of the oracle, Karen could see how much it cost her to say that. If it was within our power, we would protect our family. But it is not. The war with hell is not one that can be fought with the power we wield. We must place our hopes in those who do have the power. Those like your brother and his associates. Those like the Gote 13. Their powers lie in war, Kurosaki Karen, while ours do not. The words echoed within Karen's mind as her eyes widened. Their powers lie in war, ours do not. Perhaps you will have the strength to fight alongside your family in time. Perhaps not. But right now, the only choice you have, the only choice we have, is to believe in those who have the power to fight and do our best to ensure they do not worry for us while they go to war. Rurochio smiled sadly. If that is all we can do, then that is what we will do. She turned and walked away, leaving Karen alone with her thoughts. It had never occurred to her to worry for Ichigo. Karen had always taken for granted that he would come home, injured, perhaps, but he would always come home. He was so strong. There was no way he wouldn't. Yet Rurochio worried for her servants, people so strong that they had become her personal guard. It threw a spear of doubt into Karen's beliefs. Hell was strong too, that much was obvious if he'd managed to keep Ichigo from rescuing their mother. What if he? No, she refused to think about it. Karen grimaced as she made her way to the kitchen, looking for something to drink. Still though, Karen understood a bit more now. She wasn't being kept home simply because she was too weak to fight. No, Karen was being kept home because it was the only way Ichigo and their father could focus completely on their own battles. Even if she were strong enough to fight the Togabito, they would have asked her to stay home. Because they loved her, and wanted her to be safe from those with the power to condemn her to hell. Both Ichigo and their father had always taken on the role of family protector. They wanted to protect her. It was a little selfish of them, but Karen understood a bit better now. It had to be hard for the old man, letting Ichigo grow so strong, letting him risk his life over and over again. They just weren't ready to let Karen do the same. Karen felt her heart grow warm and her bitterness abate as the tiniest of smiles graced her face. They didn't think of her as weak. If that was the case, then she could wait a bit longer for them to be ready. In the meantime, she had powers of her own to train. She turned around with a glass of juice in her hand, only to be startled by Yuzu being right there, a confused and hurt expression on her face. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? Why didn't you tell me about your power? About your eyes of the oracle? Neliel watched her students from a distance. The wizard had made good progress in learning how to utilize their hollow powers, and now they didn't really need her anymore, outside of the occasional healing when they accidentally hurt each other. No. Neliel's attention kept wandering over to where Ichigo sat, still and silent, in the corner. What was he doing? His Reiatsu reflected that he was awake, yet, withdrawn, somehow. She could only guess that he had retreated into his inner world to deal with something. Perhaps Cazador de la Luna was acting up. Or maybe Zangetsu had a new technique for him. Yet he'd been there since before she'd arrived in the training room, which was hours ago. Neliel let out a silent sigh. Of all the humans and Shinigami she had met, she had connected most with Ichigo. Sadly, they hadn't been able to spend much time together since that night where they'd shared so much. It was understandable, of course. Ichigo was single-mindedly devoted to protecting his family, and hell was a direct threat. And then there was Zani, and all the confusion and horror of dealing with an enemy that was born of one's own heart. It would be a miracle if Ichigo got through all this without suffering too much heartbreak. I wonder, is there a kami that would listen to an Arrancar's prayers? If there was, Neliel prayed that Ichigo would get through the crisis with his life and mind intact. As if in direct answer to her prayers, Ichigo's eyes suddenly shot open, startling her. He stood and stretched, and then their eyes met. Ichigo's lips twitched into a reassuring smile, one that Neliel found herself returning. Then the wizard jerked his head towards part of the training grounds. He wanted to talk, or did he need some advice on his training? In any case, Neliel nodded amicably and walked on over, meeting Ichigo halfway. "How are you doing?" Ichigo asked quietly. "Haven't seen you in a while." "I'm doing well, Ichigo. The three you brought along have kept me pretty busy," she admitted. "But they've gone through just about everything I could teach them. What about you?" "I've been pretty busy too. Learning how to use my chains better and all, and figuring out sealing." Ichigo shook his head. "It's no wonder not many people use it. It's so much more difficult than normal Bakudo, and frankly Kido is not my strong suit." "How's that coming along?" "Oh, very well." For some reason, Ichigo smirked rather smugly for a moment before shaking his head. "I need to test my skills against a few other people though, just to make sure I've got it." The corners of Neliel's lips twitched into a playful smirk. "If you like, I'll be your opponent." "I was hoping you'd agree." He leapt back and drew Zangetsu in a single fluid motion, bringing it to a ready position. "Shall we?" "Eager, are we? We'll see who comes out on top soon enough," Neliel teased as she drew her Zanpakuto, Gamuza. A hint of pink touched Ichigo's cheeks for a moment before he rushed at Neliel, and then they began the dance of blades. Zangetsu met Gamuza over and over, but Neliel seemed to refuse to let Ichigo pressure her into a blade lock, instead choosing to deflect to one side or another if she couldn't simply dodge. It was when Neliel nearly gutted him in a counterattack that Ichigo realized that instead of brute strength, she was relying more on sheer skill, trying to take advantage of any opportunities Ichigo gave her. For her part, Neliel eyed her opponent carefully. Ichigo was not someone to take lightly. Even with merely his Shikai, he had more power behind his strikes than some of the lower Espada had had. But she had been ranked 3 for a reason, so she was more than capable of matching him in his current state. The question was, when would he use his chains? As if to answer her question, Ichigo avoided another counter slash by vanishing in a flicker of shunpo, materializing several feet to Neliel's right side. He raised his left arm and without a word conjured 3 chains that seemed to erupt from within the palm of his hand, lunging for her. Neliel snorted and merely sidestepped the chains, cutting them in half with Gamuza. What she wasn't prepared for, however, was Ichigo stepping into high gear, shunpoing over and over again, not standing in any one place for more than a split second. It happened in an instant. She felt chains hit her in the back and they wrapped around her tightly, binding even her hands to her sides. She felt a strong, too strong, Raryoku enter her body and she was frozen in place, unable to move. Even her Raryoku felt sluggish, but she had to break free. "Declare, Gamuza." Light purple Reiatsu erupted around her, and the chains snapped and fell away from her as she assumed her Resurrection form, a centaur, with white spalders, elbow guards and gauntlets. She hefted her lance and smiled at Ichigo, who she thought looked slightly impressed. "Were you expecting something else?" she commented lightly. "Honestly, I should have guessed," Ichigo admitted. "That form suits you. Don't think it's going to stop me, though." Bankai. When his Reiatsu dissipated enough to see, Neliel took sight of his Bankai with interest. His Bankai coat had changed from its solid black to matching the same style as what Ichigo had recently taken to wearing. Apparently Tensa Zangetsu approved. But there was no time to think about such things, as Ichigo had promptly taken a single step and vanished into shunpo once again, too quickly for her. It was over before Neliel even knew what was happening. All 4 of her legs had been bound by chains, and she was trapped on the floor, her body frozen, and then Ichigo was in front of her, concentrating on a length of chain that he was holding in his left hand. Neliel's eyes widened when she felt her Raryoku respond to a will that wasn't hers, and she saw no more as chains flew before her eyes. Ichigo breathed out, relaxing as he felt his chains accept Neliel's power and use it to cover every inch of her body in overlapping and interlocking chains. Seal complete. He stepped forward and very carefully sliced the chains around Neliel's face so she could see once more. "You all right?" Neliel made a show of trying to move and failing. "You know, I've no problem with it, but people are going to wonder about you if you keep chaining me up in public." This time there was no stopping the blush. Answer. Yes. Got it. Can you use your Raryoku at all? Acero. Bala. Anything. Neliel got a thoughtful look on her face, then furrowed her brows in concentration. Not at all. Nicely done, Ichigo. Thanks. You figured it out very fast. What changed? Well, I don't think my way of sealing is really what the Kido masters use. I know Urahara's seal took a lot more subtle approach. Since I'm not exactly the subtle type. No you are not, Neliel agreed. Ichigo gave her a look, then sighed and continued. I figured I'd try just sending in a bunch of Raryoku, diffusing it into yours, and then having my Raryoku drag yours into the pattern needed for the seal. Wouldn't you have to have a lot stronger Raryoku than your opponent to pull that off? Yeah, just means I'm going to have to beat hell down until he can't put up enough of a fight. Neliel smiled. She would have shaken her head in amusement, but her neck was still bound by the chains. But she was glad that Ichigo hadn't changed all that much. Mind letting me loose? Ichigo smirked at her. I don't know, I thought you liked being all wrapped in chains. Why don't I show you how much I enjoy them? Neliel whispered enticingly. Ichigo's smirk dropped instantly, and his face was so red Neliel could only laugh. After a few moments, the wizard recovered enough to speak again. I'm going to head to the living world again, get a status update. Maybe get the Kido specialists to test out my seal work, see if they can improve it. Sounds good. Are you going to let me out first? I suppose I should. A few blindingly fast swipes with Tensa Zangetsu later, the chains fell to the ground and disintegrated. Neliel quickly reverted to her usual form, sealing Gamuza. Come back soon, she told him invitingly. And maybe we can play with your chains a bit more then, Ichigo couldn't open a Garganta fast enough. He leapt in, hearing Neliel's quiet laugh follow him. He would never understand why all the powerful women in his life insisted on teasing him like that. First Yoruichi, then Neliel. Even Matsumoto tried. He shook his head. To be fair, you're a bit of an easy target. Great, even my hollow agrees. Perhaps if you didn't react quite so vividly. You too, Zangetsu. Several minutes later, a thoroughly disgruntled Ichigo stepped into the underground training ground beneath Urahara's shop, having sealed Zangetsu just to get some peace from the voices in his head. Ichigo. He turned to see Yoruichi call over to him from a fair distance away, waving him over in an urgent manner. Concerned, he shunpo-ed over to her. Yoruichi. What's wrong? A whole lot more than you know. How's your sealing coming? Pretty good, I think. Not as good as Urahara's or Yamamoto's, but I managed to seal a high-level errand card just a few minutes ago. Yoruichi let out a breath. Finally, some good news. Listen, Kazuki and Kuretsuchi have just managed to finish shifting the Dongai. We're about to call Soul Society. I hope you're rested. Odds are, the final showdown with Hell will be later today. Ichigo's eyes widened for a moment before his face hardened, and he gave a resolute nod. Then let's go call Soul Society. They briskly walked to the room that Urahara had dedicated for communications with Soul Society. Urahara was busy typing something on his computer, but nodded at Ichigo in acknowledgement of his presence. Shinji was there, presumably representing the wizard, and Ichigo couldn't help but notice the lack of hollow hole and dimmed hollow Reiatsu. He wondered for a moment when he'd taken control, but decided it might be better not to ask. Then there was Ishida, who was walking right towards him. Kurosaki. Ishida. Ichigo glanced around. Where's Chad and Inoue? They're on patrol, the Quincy quickly explained. The Togabito have been attacking periodically for over a day. Did they invade Hueco Mundo as well? Ichigo frowned. 3 times they sent an army at us, headed by Zani. Zani, the me that Hell controls. Ah, I take it he lost handily. While the armies were destroyed, I wouldn't say that Zani really lost, not considering his goal, anyway. Ichigo shook his head, though you should probably know that Grimmjow's a Togabito now. Ishida furrowed his brows, trying to remember. He was the Sexta Espada, right? You defeated him handily last time you fought him. Ichigo nodded. Just thought you should know in case he turns up here. Good to know, but you're trying to change the subject. Ishida looked at his transcendent friend critically. What was Zani's goal? Ichigo sighed. There was no getting out of this one, was there? Reintegration with me. Ishida's eyes narrowed. Is that even possible? Very. He's part of me, and if I know anything about souls, it's that they yearn to be whole. Ishida blinked. He's part of you. That was a very disturbing thought. What part of you could possibly manifest as? His voice died when he saw blackness creeping in at the whites of Ichigo's eyes, as he felt Ichigo's Reiatsu shift and become far more dangerous than it had been mere seconds before. Anyone can become evil. The only question is what circumstances would bring it about. Ichigo took a breath and forced himself to relax. Sorry, it's a bit of a touchy subject at the moment. And why is that, Kurosaki Ichigo? Ichigo stiffened, then slowly turned around. Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni's face was on the wide screen, as were all the Taicho remaining in Soul Society. A little warning would have been nice, he muttered. Urahara had the grace to look sheepish. Sorry. It matters little, Yamamoto stated. Urahara Kazuki, we have received your reports concerning Hell's apparent tactics on the living world. Kuretsuchi Taicho, have you seen them? Yes. I've also performed some independent tests to verify the results. It seems that Hell is far cleverer than we gave him credit. Then time is of the essence. Kurosaki Ichigo, it is fortunate that you have returned. What can you tell us about the situation in Hueco Mundo? Ichigo blinked. Yamamoto had, actually asked. Instead of demanding a report. The Arrancar that survived our fight with Aizen have taken residence in Las Noches. As the one who killed Aizen, most hollows seemed to respect me immensely, which made things a lot easier. I suppose it helped that I have hollow powers. In any case, the Togabito invaded 3 times, each with a small army led by Zuni, the inner Togabito we talked about before. Each army was defeated handily, and I have a number of prisoners in Las Noches. Figured it was better to deprive Hell of his infinite army as much as I could. Hieraku Shunsui, who was standing just to Yamamoto's right and behind, smiled at Ichigo and nodded approvingly. That's excellent thinking. Were you able to get anything out of them? Ichigo shook his head negatively. Not much in terms of tactical information. They were barely trained, mostly just in using Hell's chains as weapons and defenses. Many of the ones I talked to expressed a wish to be purified of their sins and sent on to the next life. But since I don't really know how Kanso works, I figured I should ask you guys. Would that work if they truly repented, or would it send them straight back to Hell? Ishida swore he saw an unholy light enter Kuretsuchi's eyes. With your permission, Sotaicho, I would undertake this research after Hell has been sealed. We shall see, Yamamoto said noncommittally. Kurosaki Ichigo, is Hueco Mundo protected? Ichigo nodded firmly. Very protected. 3 of the Vizard are stationed at Las Noches, along with all the Arrancar and a large number of hollows. I'm sure they can handle anything thrown at them short of Hell himself. Although Zuni could give them trouble, I suppose, since he's using both Zangetsu and Hell's Zanpakuto. Yamamoto's eyes opened wide. He's using Asahi no Kagami. Do I want to know how you know its name? Ichigo asked wearily. It's in the records, Yukataki explained helpfully. We only found that reference about a day ago, and we're still not entirely clear on what it does. The Transcendent sighed. Fine, I'll give you the highlights. It's an illusion-type Zanpakuto. The wielder focuses on a concept, usually an emotion, that he wants to overwhelm you with, and illusions from your own mind surround you and use your memories and feelings to break you with that concept. How do you break the illusion? Yukataki asked. You can only do it by figuring out the concept and acknowledging your feelings about the matters brought up by the illusions. Once you know the concept being used, the illusion vanishes. Ichigo shook his head. It's harder than it sounds, especially when they will ask questions designed to make you unsure of yourself. What concepts did Zuni use on you? Amagai asked. Guilt, betrayal, self-worth, pride and trust. Oh, that reminds me. Apparently Asahi no Kagami can only use up to 4 concepts on you before it needs to recharge, Ichigo commented. Adjusting his glasses, Ishida mentally re-evaluated his opinion of Ichigo's emotional maturity, and silently forgave him for his minor outburst earlier. Evidently he'd gone through quite a bit during his stint in Hueco Mundo. Though he knew that Ichigo felt guilty about some things, and that he'd recently acquired perfectly justifiable trust issues with Soul Society, Ishida had no idea that the substitute Shinigami had problems with his own self-worth. That, disturbed him more than he cared to say. That is valuable information. You have my thanks, Kurosaki Ichigo. This time, Ichigo was not the only one to look at Yamamoto strangely. Okay, what changed? Shinji asked bluntly. You don't thank anybody. Yamamoto ignored the question. Instead, he opened his eyes, and met Ichigo's eyes steadily. Kurosaki Ichigo, the Dongai is now stable. The time has come to invade the Hell Dimension and seal Hell away. I know there is no point in attempting to prevent you from coming along, not when your mother remains captive there. So I extend you this invitation. Join us on our mission to seal Hell away. Should you accept, I vow to you here and now, on the flame of Ryujin Jaka, that so long as you remain an ally of Soul Society, your family will be protected by the Gote 13, in life and in death. Ichigo's breath caught. Was he serious? Seeing Ichigo's speechless state, Yamamoto hid a secret smile. Just as he thought, as long as you protected his family, Kurosaki Ichigo would always stand at your side. You are an ally of the Gote 13, Kurosaki Ichigo. Despite our differences, we each have much to offer the other. You and your companions have done much for us, and we have every reason to believe you will continue to do so. The least we could do is guard the souls of your family. So I ask you once more, Kurosaki Ichigo, shall we work together to save all the realms from hell? There was only one answer Ichigo could give. Let's do this. Chapter 72, Invasion. The meeting moved swiftly after Ichigo accepted Yamamoto's invitation. Ichigo proposed that as the Hell Dimension had adverse effects on Shinigami Hollow hybrids, it would probably be best if none of the Vizard accompanied him. Shinji had nodded in acknowledgement of the point, but then couldn't help but ask, what about you, Ichigo? Cazador and I have been working on that. We didn't have as much trouble as you guys did anyway, and I think that's because of my previous experience with Resurrection and my higher mastery of hollow powers. But just in case, I'll refrain from hollow powers as much as I can, Ichigo told him. If it gets too bad, I'll just get Mom and get out of hell for a breather, but it shouldn't come to that. If Cazador ends up in control, he'll do the same. That all right with you, Yamamoto? Yamamoto nodded. That is acceptable. Keep us informed while we are in hell. Shihoin Yoruichi, my orders for the Gote 13 members stationed in the living world are unchanged. They are to remain here and guard against Togabito attack. However, I will shortly be sending a team trained in capturing a Togabito for study. Unless Kurosaki is willing to share one of his prisoners. Ichigo thought about it for a moment, then sighed and nodded his head. As much as he didn't want to give any sentient being to the mad scientist, he knew that if Kuretsuchi did come up with something it could mean the difference between winning and losing the war against Hell. If we have a prisoner who truly is on Hell's side, I'll bring him along when I go to Soul Society. Not sure how much good it'll do you, though, since all their chains are cut upon being taken capture as a precaution. The Quincy in the room stiffened, but kept his face carefully expressionless. That could pose a problem. Perhaps if you delivered more Togabito, my efforts to create a reliable anti-Togabito measure would proceed more smoothly, Kuretsuchi suggested. Don't press your luck, Ichigo growled. I haven't forgotten what you tried with me, and I'm under no illusions you'll be kinder to the poor bastard I'm delivering to your so-called care. Kuretsuchi raised his hands in surrender. Fine, I'll make do. He smiled broadly. I don't suppose you've changed your mind about that sample. No, Ichigo's denial was firm and unyielding. That answer will not change. Do not ask again, or you'll get your sample of my Reiatsu in a more direct manner. Kuretsuchi sighed. Still a selfish plebeian, then. Well, that was as blunt as a sarrow to the face, Ishida couldn't help but think, glancing up at Yamamoto. Strangely, the Sotaicho was unfazed by Ichigo's not-so-subtle threat towards one of his Taicho. Then again, if Yamamoto had tried to defend Kuretsuchi, it could have compromised the fledgling relations between Ichigo and the Gote 13, perhaps he was leaving that matter to be handled by Ichigo. Or perhaps not. The Sotaicho cleared his throat. The Togabito capture team will be sent to Karakura regardless to capture a Togabito with his chain intact, Yamamoto stated firmly. Kuretsuchi Taicho, do not antagonize Kurosaki, or I may just allow him to do as he wishes with you. Yes, Sotaicho, a disgruntled Kuretsuchi acknowledged. The meeting wrapped up quickly after that, and Ichigo left, presumably to Hawako Mundo, in order to pick which prisoner would be delivered to Soul Society and into Kuretsuchi's waiting hands. Ishida didn't really know how to feel about that. Even if it was a truly evil bastard, did anyone really deserve Kuretsuchi's brand of amoral care? Was it right to pay evil unto evil? Ishida's hands clenched even as his legs carried him through Karakura to his home. He understood the tactical necessity of it. He knew that Kuretsuchi Mayuri would probably be able to make something useful out of the knowledge he would glean from the Togabito. But that didn't make it right. Then again, Ishida knew intellectually that his lust to take bloody vengeance against the orchestrator of his grandfather's death twice over was hardly right either, but he doubted that would stop him if the opportunity arose. Did that make him a bad person? Ishida shook his head. No, at least, he didn't think so. He had every reason to loathe that monster in a man's skin, and his death could be considered a service to humanity. Ishida still remembered his first encounter with Kuretsuchi. The Taicho had turned his own men into bombs, and gotten away with it. And that was almost the least of his evils. But, despite it all, Kuretsuchi was, and the very idea made Ishida feel as though he needed to shower under scalding water. Kuretsuchi was useful. He could almost understand why the Gote 13 kept him. Almost. Ishida still felt that his inhumanity outweighed his worth as a scientist, but from Soul Society's point of view, it was a very gray area. In retrospect, Ishida mused, perhaps he should have expected a confrontation with Hell to raise troubling moral and ethical questions. No wonder Kurosaki had seemed tense about the subject of Zni, if Zni was truly a manifestation of some aspect of Ichigo. Arriving home, Ishida sighed and cleaned his glasses before lying down so he could rest for his next shift of Togabito target practice. He just hoped this was all over with soon. Ichigo stepped out of the Garganta and into Las Noches with a sigh. So much had been resolved, much to his amazement. His mother's safety post-rescue, peaceful relations with Soul Society, how and when they were going to take on Hell. It was astonishing to think that in the span of one meeting, nearly everything that weighed him down had been addressed. But there was one thing remaining that left a sour taste in his mouth. Ulquiorra. Ulquiorra appeared directly in front of him in a burst of sonido. Yes, Kurosaki-sama. Remind me later to ask you how the hell you're always there, even when I've only just arrived in Hawako Mundo. Ichigo shook his head. Anyway, we went through the prisoners the other day. Do you remember the ones who are genuinely on Hell's side? Ulquiorra's expression didn't change. Yes, per your orders, they were separated and imprisoned well away from the other Togabito. Fetch the most devoutly loyal of them for me and meet me in the throne room in 30 minutes. Yes, Kurosaki-sama. Ulquiorra vanished in another display of sonido. Ichigo took a deep, steadying breath and sighed. He really did not want to do this. He really did not want to give Kuretsuchi a sentient being. It felt too much like sentencing him to a tortuous death. But if Kuretsuchi was able to come up with something useful, then, Ichigo shook his head. He'd still feel guilty about it, but he'd be able to justify it better to himself. More so if it actually helped in saving his family. But first, he had a few things left to do here in Las Noches. 10 minutes later, he finished explaining everything to the Vizard and Neliel. So with any luck, tonight this whole mess will be done with. Hollow Hiyori grinned fiercely. We're coming with you, right? Wrong, Ichigo told her firmly. For one thing, do you know your name? Hiyori's grin dropped instantly. No, she admitted. Remember that the atmosphere in Hell made all the Vizard, into mindless hollows that were only controlled because I was stronger than you, Ichigo told the Vizards shortly. So I'm the only Shinigami hollow hybrid going in. No Vizard, no Arankar. We don't want anything going wrong, and we especially don't want the Central 46 to get all stupid about us. The less they know, the better. Then what is our role in this? Asked Lisa, who currently was in Shinigami form. Defense. Ichigo nodded at her in appreciation. Exactly. Hell's sent armies to Hawako Mundo repeatedly. You guys are to stay here and take out the trash. Capture where you can, and make sure Ulquiorra cuts their chains after everything's all over. Holo Love nodded, hefting his gigantic kanabo. Right then, you can count on us. Come on, Hiyori, Lisa. We should rest in case Hell does send an army our way. Hiyori and Lisa nodded, the former more reluctantly. Ichigo sighed in relief. Thanks. As the wizard left, he turned to the former Espada, whose expression was difficult to read. Nell, are you all right? It is simply a bit sudden, she explained. I had not anticipated the final battle being so close at hand. But I do understand that whether you go or not, Soul Society is invading Hell, and so this is your best chance to get your mother out. She gave him a sad little smile. I'd like to fight at your side, Ichigo, but as you've explained, Hell has strange effects on Shinigami Hollow hybrids. Ichigo tried to smile at her reassuringly, but the most he could manage was a melancholy smile of his own. I'd like you to fight at my side too, Nell. You've helped me so much in my short time here, I don't think I could have gotten this far without you. And it doesn't seem right that you can't be there with me. Nelliel's expression lightened a little, but Ichigo was surprised when she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Don't worry about it, Ichigo. I'll see you when you get back. It took him a moment, but Ichigo returned the hug. Right, see you soon, Nell. A few hours later, Ichigo stood in the main hall of the First Division, standing amongst half the Taicho of the Gote 13. Hitsugaya and Tosen were apparently still in the living world. Unohana had explained after a quiet inquiry that Jin was apparently in a medically induced coma to recover from a compounded Raryoku injury, a concept that was completely beyond Ichigo's understanding. Amagai was missing, a fact which Ichigo heard also puzzled Yukitake and Kyoraku, judging from their quiet conversation. Kuretsuchi was busy with the Togabito Ichigo had brought. Finally, Yamamoto silenced the room with a single echoing tap of his cane. We are here to plan our attack on Hell. Soifun Taicho, describe the terrain and the dangers. Hi. Hell is divided into several layers. The uppermost level is made of crisscrossing roads and buildings and was, Soifun shot a look at Kurosaki, a popular hunting ground for the Kusinada, as a large number of weak Togabito reside there. In order to progress to the next level, you have to find a dead end with a pit and jump down. The second level is largely made of water, though there are stone islands present. The Togabito Kokudo stated that the islands have skeletons of Kusinada, and remaining on that level too long will cause the Kusinada to awaken and be reborn. The third level can only be accessed by diving deeply into the water from the second level. It appears to be a volcanic area. I cannot say much, merely that it leads to a cliff that allows one to move forward to the fourth level. The fourth level is an open desert, its sands ground from the bones of Togabito who have lost all hope and died permanently in Hell. As Kokudo told it, the sand may retain some degree of malicious awareness. On this level, there is a pool of lava from which Shuren was able to resurrect other Togabito. That pool is guarded by 4 of Hell's lieutenants now, Ichigo interjected. When the eyes of several Taicho fell upon him, he shrugged. What? There's no way she would have known that, and you probably needed to know. What can you tell us about the lieutenants, Kurosaki? Yamamoto asked. They're somewhat weak to sneak attacks, Ichigo responded instantly. But they're well versed in team tactics. Their most troublesome guy is that Quincy, Ishida Haken. But at the same time, he hesitated, not sure how to word it. He ended up letting me go. He was the one who told me about the Quincy contract, and asked me to save his descendants. He seems, I dunno, trapped. He might work with us, but he might not. What about the skill levels of the others? Yukitake asked curiously. They specialize in melee combat. One-on-one they're not so difficult. I'd say Akaku or Renji could handle them individually. But like I said, they work as a team, covering for each other, Ichigo explained. If you've got a few Fukutecho working together, they could handle it. He paused. Then again, there's that one guy. That one guy, Soifun echoed derisively. Well, I didn't exactly bother to learn his name after I cut him in half, Ichigo defended himself. He was the target of my sneak attack. Kinda hard to know what he's good at since I didn't give him a chance to show his stuff. I'm sure you know what I mean, assassin. The second division Taicho snorted, but said nothing. Yamamoto tapped the ground with his cane, bringing attention back to himself. Is there anything else to add, Soifun Taicho? Kurosaki. When neither appeared to have anything more to say, he nodded. Very well. Zaraki Taicho, Komamura Taicho, Soifun Taicho, you are to accompany myself and Kurosaki Ichigo to Hell. You may bring anyone of Fukuteicho class or higher that you wish. Hiraku Taicho, I believe you have something to give Kurosaki. The normally jovial man nodded, his expression turning deadly serious as he approached the wizard. Ichigo, what I am about to give you is perhaps the most terrible weapon ever created by Soul Society. He reached into his haori and pulled out an ornately handled dagger and its sheath. Slowly, he unsheathed the dagger, revealing its wickedly jagged edge. This dagger is imbued with a spell designed by the Kido core. That spell should shatter Hell's soul as the Ryo once did. Be aware that the spell is purely theoretical, untried, untested. It may work, or it may not, but I feel it may be our best chance. He sheathed the dagger and offered it to Ichigo, who took it carefully. To use the spell, you must charge the dagger with your Raryoku and then penetrate Hell's body with the blade. Shouldn't you be giving this to your resident assassin? Ichigo asked carefully, giving Soifin a sideways glance. My name is Soifin, the Taicho in question corrected irritably. I only bother to remember the names of people who deserve it, Ichigo retorted coldly. All you've ever been to me is Soul Society's assassin. So that's all you are to me. Your name is meaningless. Hiraku glanced between the cold expression on Ichigo's face, and the quiet fury that twisted Soifin's features, before sighing and straightening up. Any problems you two have need to be set aside while you're in this room, he told them both sternly. We are all on the same side. Cease sniping at each other, or you will not like the consequences. Soifin's face cleared into an emotionless mask in seconds. Yes, Hiraku Taicho. Ichigo took a breath and sighed, releasing the tension in his shoulders. Yes, Hiraku Taicho, he echoed. Hiraku nodded. Now then, in response to your question, I would give the dagger to Soifin Taicho, but the Kido core is uncertain whether the spell could be affected by Raryoku's state of evolution. You have a better chance of affecting Hell than she does, so the dagger goes to you. Understanding, Ichigo nodded acknowledgement and carefully stashed the dagger away. He was feeling more and more confident about their chances, now, even though the idea of carrying a weapon capable of that was more than a little chilling. He met Soifin's eyes, and though her expression was carefully blank, Ichigo thought he could see suspicion reflected in her eyes. The wizard's eyes narrowed slightly. He doubted he would ever get along with Soifin, despite sharing a mentor in Yoruichi. From the beginning, nearly every interaction he'd ever had with Soifin had been hostile. If Yamamoto Sotaicho ever suggests you need to be eliminated, I will be the first to line up for the job. No, they would never be friends. Soifin would only ever be, at most, a reluctant ally. She'd made that abundantly clear. Ichigo was simply glad that Yamamoto had sworn to protect his family. Soifin wouldn't dare go against that. Soifin hadn't been entirely sure what to make of the last several hours. So much had changed in so short a time. In a single unexpected move from Yamamoto Sotaicho, Kurosaki Ichigo was now firmly an ally of Soul Society, and what had seemed to be an inevitable conflict had been avoided altogether. It had caught her flat-footed, to say the least. She had fully expected Yamamoto to end up declaring war on him once Hell was defeated, or at least supporting the Central 46's decision to do the same. It had been so easy to look at Kurosaki as an enemy. It was only a matter of time, she had thought, yet now they were on the same side, presumably permanently. Well, it wasn't like they had to be friends. Most of the Taicho were extremely wary of Kuretsuchi Taicho. Kuchiki Taicho and Zaraki not so privately hated each other's guts, but they were professional. Well, that's exaggerating a bit for Zaraki, and usually tended to ignore each other unless they were given a shared assignment, which was rare. There was no reason she and Kurosaki couldn't do the same. Hiraku Taicho's rebuke had been 100% spot on, and that it had been needed at all filled her with shame. They would have to work together for the mission in Hell, but presumably that would be the end of it. Kurosaki would go back to the living world, and if she was lucky she wouldn't so much as see him for a few decades. Even so, Soifin watched Hiraku Taicho give Kurosaki the enchanted dagger, doing her best to hide her resentment and suspicion. They were giving that to him, instead of someone who had spent her whole life training to be the fastest, the stealthiest, the most efficient in the art of dealing death. Kurosaki met her eyes, narrowing his own, and she repressed a chill that ran down her spine. Was he considering using the dagger on her first, as a test run? Hiraku Taicho had said it was untried, and if she was honest, Soifun had to admit that of all the Taicho in the room, she was the one he had the most reason to kill. If you ever come after me or my friends, you will need Yamamoto Genryusai himself at your side to save you, because I swear I will come at you with all of my power. She met Kurisaki's eyes steadily, refusing to betray her nervousness. Soifun knew she stood no chance if Kurosaki chose to attack her. She, who had been unable to pierce Aizen's skin, was almost certainly incapable of harming Kurosaki directly. But she would not lie down and die, either. Would the other Taicho attempt to stop him? Soifun wasn't sure. They did tolerate Kuretsuchi, after all, and from a purely value-oriented perspective, Kurosaki was more valuable than she was. Kurosaki finally shifted his gaze, and Soifun slowly breathed out through her nose, allowing her body to relax a fraction. His eyes had not reflected any bloodlust or even any malicious intent, just an assessment. Perhaps he was attempting to determine if she would attack him first. The thought almost made Soifun want to laugh. Like she would give him the satisfaction of being able to use self-defense as an excuse to kill her. No, she was not so foolish as to attack him directly. Nor would she attack his family, nor his friends. That was obviously a one-way ticket to death, either by Kurosaki's hands or by Yamamoto Sotaicho's, and it would serve no purpose in any case. No, as much as she despised Kurosaki, she could and would work with him. The only question that remained now was, would he work with her? The meeting was over shortly afterwards, with each member of the invasion force naming whom they would want to bring along. Komamura had elected to bring along Iba Tetsuzeman, his Fukuteicho. Kenpachi had brought along Madarame Makaku. Yamamoto and Soifun had each decided to leave their Fukuteicho behind. Ichigo had thought to bring along Yamada Hanataro, the timid 4th Division member who had helped him so much while trying to save Rukia from execution, but when he asked Yamamoto about it, the Sotaicho vetoed it. It is not a poor idea to bring a healer, especially one of such potential, Yamamoto told him quietly but firmly. However, that is what he has right now, potential. According to Unohana Taicho, he suffers from poor confidence, and is generally unable to defend himself effectively. As the number of enemies is effectively infinite, he is unsuited to this mission. Ichigo nodded understanding, inwardly marveling that Yamamoto was actually bothering to explain his reasons. It was a refreshing change. What about one of the higher-ranked healers, then? Unohana's Fukuteicho. He paused, trying to recall the name. Katetsu Azane, Yamamoto supplied. She is a wiser choice. Highly skilled in medical Kido, and not unversed in the other branches. She may accompany us. In just under an hour, everyone who was going to invade Hell was standing outside the Senkaimon. Kuretsuchi Nemu arrived shortly thereafter and bowed deeply to Yamamoto. Sotaicho, I bring equipment from Kuretsuchi Taicho. Explain their purpose. Yes, Sotaicho. Each of these are tracking devices, meant to aid in mapping Hell. They also serve as health monitors. She passed out a set of simple black wristbands to everyone, before holding up an earbud. These are interdimensional communicators. Kuretsuchi Taicho does not anticipate them to work for long. The power requirements for the continuous connection are too large. They will be remotely activated when you enter Hell. And why does Kuretsuchi Taicho believe we need these equipment? Yamamoto asked calmly. Nemu bowed once more. I believe it has two purposes. The communicators and trackers in conjunction will allow me to guide Katetsu Fukuteicho to your locations, so as to prioritize healing appropriately. It also allows for a continuous stream of auditory information, with which Kuretsuchi Taicho may be able to devise further research in the event of this mission's failure. Very well. Yamamoto placed the band on his wrist, and put the earbud into his ear swiftly. The others quickly did the same. Then the Sotaicho turned, opened the Senkaimon. Chad's head shot up as he sensed not one, not two, but many Togabito entering Karakura. Inoue. I sense it too, Sato-kun. Inoue's face was grave, without a trace of a smile. It seems Hell has detected our efforts at negating his Reishi's influence, Yoruichi's voice commented calmly through their communicators. We must be doing something right. How many? Chad asked calmly, getting to his feet. And where? Enough to warrant bringing out the reserves, and all over Karakura. You know what to do, so get moving. Indeed they did, having discussed it with Yoruichi and Urahara earlier in case such an event happened. They looked at each other for only a moment more. Then Chad flashed away with his specialized high-speed movement. Inoue hopped up and without a word materialized her Santen Keshun, landing and kneeling on it. Take me higher. She rose higher and higher, until she could see Karakura in its entirety. A flicker of Shunpo, and Hachigen materialized in front of her. He offered her a tiny smile. Are you ready, Inoue Orihime? Yes. Chad was not having an easy time. He'd gone as quickly as he could to the school, to protect its inhabitants, but it seemed that he had somehow become the lone defender against a siege of Togabito. Chad grunted as one of the Togabito he was fighting landed another hard blow to his right arm. He counterattacked with his Brazo Izquierda del Diablo. Le Muert. The Togabito in question practically disintegrated from the devastating hit, but there was no time to think about that as Chad flashed away, narrowly avoiding a debilitating strike from a mace before delivering a deadly punch with his left arm, knocking the Togabito's head from his shoulders. It had been like that for a few minutes, but there was no rest. Even now, more portals were appearing nearby, some to take the corpses, some to deliver more Togabito. Sensing one just a few feet behind him, Chad leapt back, preparing himself. From this portal, another 2 Togabito came through, though these 2 were very familiar. Huh, didn't think I'd see you again. Please, step aside, don't make us kill you. It was Hana and Kiru, the Togabito whom had questioned Chad, Ishida and Inoue several days ago. Chad didn't move from his spot. Hell means to assimilate the living world, he said simply. I have no choice. Neither do we. They stared at each other for a long moment. Well, if you won't surrender, then I wish you luck, Hana offered. You'll forgive me if I don't wish you the same, Chad replied dryly. Hana snorted. Funny. And then she leapt into action, Kiru only a step behind her. Chad fell into a fighting stance. He wouldn't let them through without a fight. Licked region. Hana was forced to grab her partner and flash away in a high-speed technique to keep from being skewered by an onslaught of arrows. 2-on-1's a bit unfair, don't you think? Ishida landed next to Chad. Hana merely smirked. This area is worth 2 fighters of the living world. I wonder what area of Karakura is going unprotected. None, Chad replied simply. Can't you feel it? Ishida asked derisively. Failing that, can't you hear it? As if his words were a trigger, a hollow roar suddenly echoed loudly in the distance. Ishida used a single finger to shift his glasses further up his nose as he allowed himself a small smirk. He had timed that perfectly. Did you really think us short on capable defenders? Kurosaki is not the only Shinigami Hollow hybrid that resides here. Do you really think that killing us will end anything? Hana demanded. Don't you know the real purpose behind the invasions? Of course we do. Spiritual resonance, I believe Urahara-san called it. And as it happens, we already have someone on it. What person could possibly handle this much of Hell's Reishi? Kiru asked disbelievingly. What power could undo the changes? Chad merely pointed upwards, and to both Togabito's astonished disbelief, a golden dome replaced the sky for several seconds before becoming transparent, though all of them could still sense its presence. When Kiru and Hana had recovered enough to look back at their opponents, both Chad and Ishida were in battle-ready positions. Ishida raised his bow and aimed. Surrender, or I'll use these Quincy powers of mine to send you back to hell. Ayame, Shuno, Soten Kishun, I reject. The 2 fairies sped off to opposite sides of Karakura. For a brief moment, Inoue wasn't sure it would work, but then a golden dome appeared over the city. Inoue closed her eyes and concentrated. She didn't want to prevent anything from leaving or entering. She wanted the dome to be transparent. When she opened her eyes, it was as she desired. Nicely done, Hachi complimented. How is the drain? Not bad, not when I'm not doing anything. She smiled at the wizard. Thanks for being here. Hachi smiled back. Restoring Raryoku is no trouble at all. I'm merely glad I can help. Are you ready for the hard part? Inoue nodded and closed her eyes again. She raised her arms, palms down towards the giant invisible shield she'd conjured. She focused on all the reishi of Karakura, and she could feel it slowly begin to change under the continuous onslaught of more and more portals to hell opening and closing. That was something she could not allow. I reject. Her Soden Kishun shuddered for a moment, and Inoe's face tightened with strain. But she could feel it begin to make a difference, could feel the reishi of the living world revert to how it should be. Inoue felt warmth of healing Kido spread from the top of her head down to the rest of her body and smiled, relieved as she immediately began to feel better. Hachi had her back. With his help, she would protect the living world. Chapter 73. Men and Gods. Ichigo's expression was calm as he stepped foot into hell for the third and hopefully final time. He'd prepared himself as best he could, and he was working side by side with Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni, the most powerful pure Shinigami born in thousands of years. It was time to bring this conflict to an end. Behind him, the Senkaimon closed as Katetsu Azane stepped through, the last person to arrive. "Your orders, Sotaicho?" Soifin asked deferentially. Yamamoto cast his gaze upon hell. They'd entered the uppermost level, judging from Soifin's descriptions. Yet he could not see even a single Kushinaga. While that would make traversing hell easier for the moment, it was troubling. Had hell made the effort to reabsorb the rest of his soul fragments? Had he regained his full strength? It made no difference. They had no choice but to move forward. "We move." Soifin Taicho led us to the next level. "Hi, Sotaicho." She leapt onto one of the blue roads and began to run, mindful to keep her speed low enough that everyone could keep up easily. Yamamoto decided to stay in the back, near to the Fukutecho and Kurosaki. If he was lucky, perhaps he'd overhear their conversations. "So, what's with the new look?" Madarame asked curiously. "I'm more than just a Shinigami," Kurosaki answered calmly. "More than that, I'm not a member of the Gote 13, so I have no right to wear that uniform. This is what I came up with instead. Black for the part of me that is Shinigami, white for the part of me that is hollow. I am Vizard, and that is not going to change." He shrugged. It seemed to help with getting hollows to listen to me, anyway, being able to tell with just a glance that I'm not part of the Gote 13. Yamamoto frowned slightly to himself. Kurosaki's reticence in joining the Gote 13 had been explained to him by Kiraku Shunsui. While frustrating, his reasons were understandable. Perhaps in time, when tensions relaxed and relations were smoother, they could revisit the issue. "I thought this place would have more people," Madarame commented as they ran. Indeed, the people they saw were few and far between, hiding the instant they saw movement. "It did, last time I was here," Kurosaki replied quietly. Yamamoto listened, but took care not to appear so. "But I think most of them are in Hell's army now." "What makes you say that?" Iba questioned. "One of the Togabito at Las Noches, Tasuki, told me that Hell's lieutenants came recruiting. Given the choice between being eternally hunted by Kushinaga, without food, without rest, or joining the local army and being guaranteed the necessities to make life a little more bearable." Yamamoto gave the slightest of nods to himself. It was as he'd expected. Desperation was a powerful motivator. Still though, he wondered, had Kurosaki really developed the stomach for interrogation? Or had this Tasuki volunteered the information? "Kurosaki-san, I find myself curious, do you know what sin she had committed?" Komamura queried. Kurosaki shook his head negatively. "Never really came up. She just wanted to be purified and sent on to her next life. Failing that, she was ready to send herself to the desert Soifin mentioned." "The one made from the bones of Togabito?" Madarame asked incredulously. "Yeah, purification or oblivion. I convinced her to wait, to see if we had a method of determining if a person had repented their sin in the afterlife." Yamamoto repressed a sigh. Sadly, no such technique currently existed to his knowledge. It had never been needed, really. Kanso worked for Plus Souls, and Hollows found purification through being slain by Kido or Zanpakuto. On the other hand, perhaps Kanso could work, potentially. All souls had the power to purify themselves. It was the reason why many humans could make their way to Soul Society immediately upon their demise without requiring assistance from Shinigami. It might just be possible for Togabito to purify themselves of their sins in life, perhaps through genuine repentance. If that were the case, then a Kanso would be all the push that was needed to send the Togabito onwards to Soul Society. Once the chains were removed, of course. Perhaps when the current crisis was over, he could set up a semi-permanent outpost in Hell. A highly trained squad of Shinigami, rotating out periodically, performing Kanso on any Togabito that requested it. Kuretsuchi would likely have a solution to the chain problem once the Togabito capture team succeeded in acquiring an appropriate subject. This bore thinking about more, but now was not the time. Yamamoto made a mental note, promising himself to come back to it later, before returning his attention to his present surroundings. Down here, Soifun said curtly, having reached the end of the path. She dove without another word, and the others followed a few moments after. Piercing through to the second level of hell, Yamamoto blinked in surprise, coming to a stop in midair along with everyone else. Completely opposed to how Kurosaki and Soifun had described, there were Togabito everywhere. Kurosaki grunted. What's going on? Did they decide to use this place for training? Use your eyes, Kurosaki, Soifun rebuked. Surely you can see that circle of Togabito. They're doing something. Indeed, there was a ring of Togabito, perhaps 7 of them. Seconds later, a red portal appeared, and perhaps a dozen other Togabito leapt through before it collapsed on itself. It's a departure point, Komamura observed. Hell is attacking. The question is, the living world or Hueco Mundo? Or even Soul Society? My instruments detect no Togabito in Soul Society at this time, Sotaicho, Kuretsuchi's voice reported instantly. They appear to be entirely focused on the living world at this time. Yar, another familiar voice interjected. Mind if I use this line? You were so kind setting it up, Mayuri. Urahara Kazuki. The 12th Division Taicho hissed. Get off. It was clear the exile wasn't listening at all. Oh, you don't mind. Thanks. Anyway, just letting you know, the living world seems to be doing well for the moment, but I might suggest hurrying along. Or perhaps hindering them somehow. I don't know how long everyone can last against such a continued assault. Got it, Urahara, Kurosaki replied. Keep me posted. Of course. Kurosaki turned to face Yamamoto, and the latter knew exactly what he was about to ask. Holding up a hand to forestall the request, the wizened Sotaicho merely nodded at him. Kurosaki, you and I will continue alone to face hell. Everyone else, do your duty. Protect the living world. Hi. With that, they all leapt into action, Zaraki and Madarame laughing the whole way. Kurosaki nodded at Yamamoto with appreciation in his eyes, and Yamamoto felt a brief surge of satisfaction. Kurosaki was beginning to see the Gote 13 in a more positive light. Good. That would ease communications and relations between their forces. Kurosaki, lead the way. All right, let's go. Kurosaki flashed away with Shunpo, flying at high speed directly towards the ocean below. Yamamoto followed, making a mental note of Kurosaki's skill in Shunpo. It was faster than many of his Taicho. Perhaps some remedial training was in order. Then again, Kurosaki had been trained by Shihoin Yoruichi, the goddess of flash. It was only to be expected, Yamamoto supposed. Several seconds after diving into the water, Kurosaki and Yamamoto emerged into the 3rd level of hell, an area littered with yellow lava pools. Just a moment, Kurosaki requested. What is it? I'm just checking something. I'll only be a few seconds. Kurosaki closed his eyes and took a breath, focusing before reaching out and touching thin air. No, if he focused, Yamamoto could make out ribbons. Raraku. Kurosaki was using Raraku to track his mother. Smart. If hell wasn't immediately nearby, he could simply grab her and go. Is she on this level, Kurosaki? No. Ichigo's scowl intensified. She's in the desert somewhere. He shook his head. Her Reiatsu is too weak to get an exact location. Not from here. I'll try again when we get to that level. He nodded to himself. All right, let's keep moving. Yamamoto nodded, reevaluating his opinion of Kurosaki yet again. How many times had he had to do that in the last year? In the last month, even. He'd lost count. When he had first seen Kurosaki Ichigo face to face, as the boy had dramatically saved Rukia from her execution, that was all Yamamoto had seen. A boy, one with more power than Yamamoto would have liked, but a mere child nonetheless. A boy who adhered to simple ideals, a boy who was only beginning to learn wisdom, a boy who needed time to grow into his potential, a boy who needed to be guided carefully to ensure that everything that Yamamoto held dear would not be destroyed. When Yamamoto had interacted with him in the false Karakura, during the confrontation with Aizen's forces, he had seen something similar but distinctly different. The Sotaicho had seen a rebellious teenager, one who had formed his own opinions, made his own decisions and resented being treated as a child while being forced to carry the responsibilities of a man. Not long later, when Kurosaki Masaki had been kidnapped, Kurosaki Ichigo had appeared before him with such barely controlled rage that Yamamoto had seen what he had suspected might lay there since the beginning, a side that promised death and destruction to any and all who dared to strike at his heart. A side that had seemingly confirmed the inevitability of war with Kurosaki. The brief communication with Zangetsu's manifested spirit, and that had been quite a shock, considering whom Zangetsu resembled so closely, had only lent more credit to that idea. But then Kurosaki had prostrated himself, begging for help in saving his mother from hell. And in that moment, Yamamoto had seen a desperate man. The amount of growth that Kurosaki had displayed, in mere days, he'd matured so much. And despite their ensuing confrontation outside the Barine home, that impression had remained. Yamamoto had understood, much as he had not wanted to. Kurosaki had been desperate, and so he took the only choice he could see. Yet now, when Yamamoto cast his gaze upon Kurosaki Ichigo, Yamamoto saw neither an idealistic boy nor a desperate man, nor anything in between. Kurosaki was keeping his Reiatsu within the realm of his perception, at least for the moment, and Yamamoto had had millennia to hone his ability to read and translate Reiatsu. He no longer needed to meet his opponent's Zanpakuto with his own to feel and understand the emotions that echoed in their Reiatsu. And as Yamamoto examined Kurosaki's Reiatsu, there was no rage, no joy, no sorrow, no hate, no love, no fear, nothing at all beyond a calm certainty. Kurosaki Ichigo was absolutely certain that he would succeed in what he set out to do. No hindrance would hold him long. Any setback was only temporary. He did not feel this way out of arrogance or pride. Yamamoto would have been able to detect hints of those. And so what Yamamoto saw right then was an exceedingly dangerous man. Anyone who could enter that unfettered state of mind, that mindset of perfectly calm willingness to achieve absolute victory at all cost, was someone to watch carefully. If that person was someone of Kurosaki's power, well, perhaps he did have the potential to seal away hell after all. And if Yamamoto was lucky, and played his cards with care, perhaps he would have an ally who could fight at his side when Yuwatch finally made his move. Underneath the sands of the desert, in Hell's hideaway, Zuni raised his head. He could feel it. Kurosaki Ichigo was in Hell. Like it or not, it was time for the final confrontation. He's here. It was not a question. Either Masaki had unknown till then sensing abilities, or Zuni was just that easy to read. The Togabito wasn't sure which he preferred. Even so, he turned towards Masaki, who met his gaze evenly. Yes, he is. So what are you going to do, Zuni? Whose side are you on? Hell's, or my son's? Zuni chuckled as he stood up. Whose side am I on? I'm on the same side I've always been on. As for what I'm going to do, he flashed a cocky smile in her direction before vanishing from her sight and reappearing directly behind her, Zangetsu drawn and ready. What are you? Masaki yelped in surprise as Zuni effortlessly cut off the chains that held her to the wall, leaving the currently intangible chains of hell, and hefted her over his shoulder in a smooth movement. What does it look like I'm doing? Zuni asked with a tone that practically oozed amusement. I'm kidnapping you. As Zuni took off running towards the stairs, Masaki breathed a silent sigh of mingled relief and exasperation. Did you have to throw me over your shoulder like a sack of potatoes? She demanded. You can't run as fast as I can, Zuni replied easily as he leapt out into the desert air, flickering into Shunpo. I could if I had my powers, Masaki grumbled under her breath. If she hadn't lost her powers, then this whole mess would never have happened. She could have taken down those kidnappers, so she never would have been trapped and sent to hell. Then again, if she hadn't lost her powers, she wouldn't have died in the first place, and Ichigo would have grown up very differently. You say something. No. Good, because we're here. Masaki didn't even have time to blink before Zuni had set her down on her feet, just in time to see two people emerge onto this level of hell. Looks like Ichigo's brought along the old man. And so he had, but Masaki's eyes were drawn only to the younger of the two. Ichigo. Mom. The single word was filled with so much relief that Masaki could only smile. You all right? I'm fine, thanks to Zuni. Ichigo's gaze left his mother's, and he locked eyes with the man who shared his face. He stepped towards him and nodded. Thanks, Zenny. Zenny's eyes narrowed. Wait, there had been something in the way Ichigo had said that, the way that he had thanked him. It had been genuinely appreciative. No reservation at all. Ichigo should still have been reserved, confused about his nature, unless, his expression lightened somewhat, appearing half hopeful, half disbelieving. You get it, don't you? You know what I am. I do, Ichigo agreed calmly. Let's get Mom out of here, and then we can figure out how to fix this. Zenny smiled. Shall we break the chains together, then? His voice was eager, but his body language reflected his true feelings. He was unsure if Ichigo was telling the truth. Yes, Ichigo answered quietly. Let's protect her together. Masaki was stunned to see Zenny's face practically shine with relief and hope. Just what part of Ichigo was Zenny? Obviously Ichigo had figured it out, and the curiosity was killing her. But that was a question for another time. Apparently Yamamoto agreed, as the old man cleared his throat. Kurosaki, Zenny. Right, Ichigo interrupted. Come on, Zenny, let's get out of hell and break her chains. Chains first, Zenny corrected. They should be weaker right now, if hell's not focusing directly on them. If we get her out of hell, he'll sense it and strengthen them. Fair enough, Ichigo acceded. And don't bother powering up just yet, the Togabito told him sternly. Hell gave me some of his power. The chains should recognize it and break without you announcing your presence. Nodding grimly, Ichigo took a step back, allowing the manifestation of his desire to protect to do as he wished. Zenny took a breath, and focused hard. Masaki gave a startled gasp as she felt Hell's chains shift on her, materializing several feet of them. Zenny drew Hell's Zanpakuto. Reveal the truth, Asahi no Kagami. And then he swung downwards with all his strength. To everyone's surprise, the chains glowed brightly just before impact, and a bolt of what looked like red lightning jumped out of the chain and into Zenny's chest. Zenny crumpled to the ground. Ichigo's eyes went wide even as he dashed over to Zenny. What just happened? I assume that's not a normal occurrence when attempting to cut the chains. Yamamoto asked quietly. No, the chains are static. They don't fight back like that. Ichigo answered disbelievingly, holding out a hand for Zenny to take. The Togabito grasped it readily. It was, hell, Zenny grunted as he slowly got to his feet. He rubbed his chest and took a steadying breath. It was a trap, or maybe a warning. Hell knew from the beginning that the only one I would attempt to free was her. I should have guessed, but it was worth a shot. Ichigo frowned. Was it the chains, you, or the combination? I have no idea. Zenny shook his head. New plan. Let's get her out of hell, and then you can try. I have a different plan, a new voice stated dryly from directly behind them. I kill you all, and I win. Ichigo and Zenny leapt away in mirrored actions, now standing on either side of Masaki, blades drawn and ready. I think I like Zenny's plan better, Ichigo replied contemptuously. Kurosaki. Yamamoto barked out. Take her and go. Ichigo nodded at him, and in a flicker of shunpo, he and his mother were gone. Hell quirked an eyebrow at Yamamoto and Zenny. He was smiling, a small but supremely confident smile, as if nothing had changed, as if he was still in complete control of the situation. Do you really think I'll let them escape? I should ask the same to you, Yamamoto replied, raising his Reiatsu to the point where flames were beginning to lick at the sands around his feet. His cane lit a flame, and a moment later, the strongest fire-type Zanpakuto in Soul Society was released in the Sotaicho's hands. Do you truly believe that I'll let you past? Hell chuckled even as fire engulfed their surroundings, encircling them. You still don't understand. Even if you did somehow manage to restrain me in this very spot, and you do not have that power, I don't need to pass you to keep them here. He spread his arms wide, gesturing towards their surroundings. This world is mine, Yamamoto. Yamamoto's expression was unchanged. I understand more than you think, hell. I don't understand the mechanics of how it came to be, but this world is certainly yours. It's tied to your will. Which means that if you are distracted, if your will slips, then Kurosaki will succeed. His eyes opened minutely, and that, hell, is certainly within my power. Hell's smile cracked, and then fell completely from his face. I see. I underestimated your perception. That won't happen again. Allow me to honor you by allowing you to see the truth of yourself, the folly of your own existence. Reveal the truth, Asahi no Kagami. Yamamoto readied his blade. You fool, you truly believe that I hold no chance against you. You believe that you know me, that you know the strength of my soul. Don't I? Hell responded. You are the Sotaicho of the Gote 13, an incredibly strong Shinigami, strong enough to give Aizen Sosuke pause, but no more than that. HMPH. You must be acquiring your information from one of the traitors Arankar. Allow me to tell you exactly whom you are dealing with. Yamamoto swung Ryujin Jaka at his opponent, letting loose a wave of fire. Hell promptly disappeared and reappeared a short distance away. My name is Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni. I have lived for millennia, in times of war and in times of peace. I have made damning mistakes. I have won impossible victories. I have committed terrible atrocities, ordered and led utter genocide, not once, not twice, but thrice, in the name of world balance, in the name of sanity, in the name of the human soul. Yamamoto's eyes opened the slightest crack as he allowed his Reiatsu to flare out even further, and fire seemed to engulf him, yet never burning him. I am he who conquered Soul Society and united the strongest under my rule. I am he who fought and survived the first Quincy, you watch, 1,000 years ago, destroying his powers. Yamamoto took vicious pleasure in seeing hell begin to pale, and finally let his full Reiatsu loose for complete intimidation factor. Fire was everywhere, flame touched everything, and the very sand that Yamamoto stood upon burned to ash. Gods, how long had it been since he had really been able to let loose, to bring every bit of his power to bear against a worthy opponent? I have had 1,000 years since then to increase my power, hell. Now taste the ever-burning flame of my soul. Bankai. All of the fire that Yamamoto had generated swirled towards his blade, as if sucked in by some invisible vortex. A mere second later, Yamamoto was holding an ancient and worn katana, blackened and burnt. Zanka no Tachi. Now, Yamamoto bared his teeth in utter defiance. Can the fires of hell compare to me? Completely forgotten by the two opponents, Zeni had taken the opportunity to chase after Ichigo and Masaki. He wanted to be reunited with Ichigo as soon as possible, after all. And Ichigo had completely forgotten that Zeni, as a Togabito, should be capable of opening a portal back to the living world. Idiot, Zeni muttered. The Togabito barely blinked as he felt Asahi's presence disappear, as he felt the lone blade return to her true master. He'd known it was coming. After all, hell or not, it was suicide to take on the Sotaicho without a weapon. It was too bad, though. He'd been curious if Ichigo would be able to wield Asahi no Kagami after they reunited. Zeni finally managed to catch up to Ichigo on the second level of this damned dimension, the one where Hell's forces had been mobilizing to invade the living world. Emerging from the water swiftly, he came to a stop in midair, a few feet away from Ichigo, who appeared completely stunned. Turning to see what Ichigo was staring at, Zeni's jaw dropped. Even he hadn't expected the kind of carnage that he was seeing now. The islands were virtually covered in blood and bodies. Madarame Akaku was laughing madly as he attacked with his bankai. Crimson life was splashed across Akaku's bare chest, face and arms. The dragon emblem on his bankai was completely filled and shining a bright, bloody red. Every swing was shattering chains, every hit was slicing a Togabito to ribbons, every miss was flinging Togabito dozens of meters away simply from the pressure of the attack. Not one to be left behind, Zaraki was dashing through the Togabito, leaving piles of bodies behind. At some point, his eye patch had come off, and his enormous, oppressive Reiatsu could be clearly felt even where Ichigo was. The bells in his hair jingled sweetly, continuously, in stark contrast to the destruction that Zaraki was committing with every step. Not too far away, Komamura had activated his bankai and was outright crushing dozens of Togabito with every swing of his sword. Iba was nearby, using his shikai to kill any Togabito that got too close or tried to sneak behind the wolf Taicho. Between the two of them, neither seemed to have acquired any injuries. Soifun and Katetsu hung back, not engaging in the fighting but keeping a close eye on everyone. Well, I have a newfound respect for those guys. I'm just glad that Zaraki and Madarame held back against us when we invaded Soul Society, Zeni finally said. No kidding, Ichigo agreed. You fought those guys, Masaki screeched. And lived. Neither Ichigo nor Zenny really heard her. The portal's unstable, Ichigo commented. We probably shouldn't take that way out. I'll try to open a portal myself, Zenny volunteered. He took a moment, concentrated his power, only to have it fizzle out as he attempted to form the portal. Damn, should have known. Hell's restricted the ability to generate portals again. I bet you anything that only his most trusted have that power now. Ichigo narrowed his eyes as he tapped his earbud. Kuretsuchi, send me a Jigokucho. There was no response. Oi, anyone there? Still nothing. Damn it. Nemu did say that they wouldn't last long. Wait, you got here through Soul Society? Zenny asked. Yeah, dimension shifting, that sort of thing. The Dongai is now between Hell, Soul Society and the living world. Now shut up, I'm trying to get us out of here. Ichigo focused his intent, and tried to open a Senkaimon himself, to no avail. Then he tried opening a Garganta. That didn't work either. Ichigo let out a growl of frustration. Hell's really got the place locked up tight, and I don't want to risk taking Mom through that unstable portal. It was then that Ichigo felt it, an immense wave of fiery power coming from where he'd left Yamamoto. He turned around in surprise. This is way stronger than when he used Shikai. Did he go Bankai? Doesn't matter. We've got to get her out of here, Zenny reminded Ichigo. None of our planned exit strategies have panned out. Do you have any ideas? Ichigo asked pointedly. As a matter of fact, I do. We blow open the gates of Hell. Ichigo paused for a moment to consider, then shrugged. Works for me. That way I can get back inside to help seal Hell. Let's go. Masaki just stared at her son and Zenny disbelievingly. Did you just say that you were going to blow up the gates of Hell? Blow open, Zenny corrected, but yep. Now up you get. The Togabito swept Masaki over his shoulder and began flying upwards towards the topmost level of Hell, Ichigo right on his heels. Masaki just stared into nothing. Her son had just nonchalantly agreed to blow up the gates of Hell. Her son had put together an army, defied the ruler of Hell, and just agreed to blow up the gates of Hell. For her, a small part of her brain reminded her that Ichigo had always been obsessed with protecting her, even when he was young. Ichigo had always put on that smile whenever he could do anything for her, even if it had only been walking between her and the road on rainy days so she wouldn't get splashed by cars. Ichigo had started attending a dojo because he wanted to protect her, Yuzu and Karen. At the time, it had been adorable. Later, it had become much more serious. Even so, Masaki had understood his motivations for becoming a Shinigami, for saving Rukia, for fighting Aizen. They had made sense. Ichigo had wanted to protect his family, so he became a Shinigami. Ichigo had wanted to repay a debt, and so he saved Rukia. Ichigo had found himself in a position to help protect Karakura, so he'd fought Aizen. In all of those fights, he'd fought people. People with supernatural powers, sure, but people nonetheless. Shinigami and hollows they may be, but gods they were not. They were not immortal, merely long-lived. They were not invincible, merely durable. They were not all-powerful, merely strong. They had limits within the realm of conceivability. Even Ichigo, who had defeated Aizen, had such limits. He could still be injured, or even die. He still required food and water for life. He still felt the needs of human companionship. Ichigo was still mortal. But Hell defied comprehension. Zenny had told Masaki what he knew, at her request. When he was killed, he did not die. He created from nothing. He subsisted on nothing. Togabito could draw on his power at will to protect themselves and attack their foes. It had literally taken a god, the Ryo, the ultimate ruler of the afterlife, to shattering Hell's soul to eliminate the threat, and even then, Hell's soul had persisted in the form of Kusanada. There was no other word that Masaki could use to describe Hell. Hell was a god. So the question that burned in Masaki's mind right then was simply this: how could a mortal defeat a god? They reached the gates of Hell within a few minutes. You ready? Zenny asked. Ichigo grunted an affirmative, and Masaki watched curiously as his face took on an expression of concentration. He drew Zangetsu, but even before it was fully drawn, black flame washed over him. A few seconds later, Ichigo had entered Bankai and Resurrection. He took a deep breath, gathering his power. Zni, shield her, because I'm not going to hold back. Obediently, Zni moved to protect Masaki with his body. The former Quincy poked her head around him to watch, though. Masaki's eyes went wide as she watched red light spiral into existence between his horns, growing larger and larger. And then she saw him purposely cut his hand with Tensa Zangetsu. She was about to question him, but her voice died as she saw the blood float upwards, integrating with Sero, turning it black as pitch. Gran Rey Sero. Despite bracing herself, Masaki was unprepared for the raw power of the attack. It hadn't exploded against the gates, or pushed them open. It had ripped through them. There was now a gigantic circular hole directly in the center of the gates, easily tall enough for a being twice Ichigo's size. And then all three of them froze when they heard an ominous chuckle not far behind them. Oh bravo! Well done! Ichigo turned around. Sure enough, there was Hell, standing there and chuckling as though they had just told a merry joke. So, you got past Yamamoto? He demanded, stepping between his mother and Hell. Oh, not yet, Hell admitted. I'm still down there, and at the same time, I'm here. I must say, I should thank you, Kurosaki Ichigo. What for? Hell merely smiled knowingly at him. Why do you think all my Togabito use portals? Why did I not just have them leave out the front door? Because if you managed to materialize the gates in the living world, it would provide a singular location to defend, Ichigo retorted. I'm not stupid. Of course not. But let me ask you something, Kurosaki Ichigo. Why would I put the gates in this dimension, when I want all souls to come under my sway? Why would I place a barrier that could hinder me? Obviously so that your enemies couldn't get in, Ichigo replied simply. You were at war with the Ryo and the king of Hueco Mundo after all. No, Ichigo, Zni corrected, narrowing his eyes. Remember, all of Hell's forces will revive shortly in this dimension upon death. And any who die here become Togabito. There's no reason for Hell to stop anyone from coming in or going out. Absolutely right. So, naturally, I am not the one who made the gates. Can you guess who did? Behind the mask of his resurrection, Ichigo's eyes widened. The Ryo, he breathed. It was to protect the living world, the humans who weren't part of the war. He must have wanted to ensure that no one would accidentally make their way into Hell, that no one tried to fight you alone. And to keep you here, where you could do the least damage. Oh, you're good. Hell's grin turned positively predatory. The gates have never responded to my will. I could unleash my full power against it, and the gates wouldn't budge an inch. The Ryo designed the gates to open only for newly damned souls to be claimed, or if someone sufficiently powerful, someone whose powers contained no trace of my own, struck them. Wait, but weren't the gates opened earlier? Zni asked. They were, by a group of 3 Shinigami, Hell agreed amenably. However, I was not prepared to take advantage of that opportunity, having just been reborn. But I knew that as long as I held your mother, Kurosaki Ichigo, you would come back for her. All I had to do then was remove every other option besides opening the gates. Which you have just done for me. So, I thank you, Kurosaki Ichigo. For you have just given me the last thing I needed. And with that, Hell walked right through the hole in the gates, and into the living world. Chapter 74. Apocalyptic War. Oh shit. No one knew which of the three said it. The sentiment was shared between Ichigo, Zni and his mother. As it was, they had to move quickly. Ichigo's brain flashed through a few possible courses of action before settling on one. He turned on his heel and lashed out with Tensa Zangetsu. Masaki blinked as remnants of chains fell to the ground, clinking. Zni, get her home, then get your ass over and help me fight him. No, Masaki rejected, putting every bit of motherly authority she had in her voice. Both Ichigo and Zni flinched, stumbling from where they'd both begun to move. Why the fuck not? Ichigo demanded. If you fight Hell in the living world, you're going to kill a lot of innocent people who are just in the way. Masaki pointed out, her voice hard. You need a way to force Hell back into this dimension. And exactly how am I supposed to do that without fighting him? Ichigo asked sarcastically. The same way he forced you out without fighting you, Masaki answered, looking at her son intensely. Open a portal under him and shove him through when he's not expecting it. And the only way that's going to happen is if Zni stays here. At least let me take you home first. Ichigo pleaded. No, Masaki replied, her voice firm. Now that I'm free of hell's chains, I can feel them, my powers. Ichigo blinked behind the mask. Your powers. Your father never told you. Masaki cracked a cocky smirk that made Ichigo realize exactly whom he'd inherited the trait from. She raised her arm, and reishi quickly gathered, forming a bow. Ichigo, I'm a Quincy. The wizard's eyes went wide. She was a Quincy. Her powers were coming back, of course. When she'd become a Togabito, she'd gained access to Raryoku again. But the Quincy abilities must have been suppressed by Hell to keep her prisoner. Now that the chains were gone, Hell no longer had the power to hold her power at bay. But if his mom was a Quincy, then, did that make Ichigo a Quincy? Oh God, did he have another spirit lurking inside him to be the manifestation of his Quincy powers? But wait, if he was a Quincy, why hadn't he ever been exposed to them while growing up? Did his father being a Shinigami have something to do with it? I have so many questions. And I'll answer all of them as best I can when this is all over. But right now, while Zuni is working on that portal, he needs me to be there to protect him. Trust me, Ichigo, Masaki told him with a reassuring smile. I don't know what part of him you are, but you do. And if you're willing to accept him, then I will too. I don't care what you look like, what you are. She reached up and touched Ichigo's Resurrection mask tenderly. I know who you are, beneath that mask. You're still my Ichigo, my precious son. I just want you to be safe, Ichigo murmured. I know, you never could hide your heart from me. You've wanted all your life to protect me, to protect your sisters. But I'm your mother, it's my job to protect you. Please, just trust me. Ichigo didn't know what to say. Finally, he nodded. All right, Mom, stay safe. He shot Zuni a look, and the Togabito nodded resolutely. With that, he vanished in a burst of sonido, launching himself into the living world. Inoue knew instantly when things started to go wrong. No, she grit her teeth. What's wrong, Inoue? Hachigan asked urgently. Is the burden too much? That's not it. The gates. There's a hole in the gates of hell. Despite everything, the gates have materialized. Hachigan paled. Shihoin-san, what happened? The blast that made the hole came from within hell, Yoruichi reported quickly. Kazuki says the signature belongs to Ichigo. The gates have always been the weakest point between the living world and hell by necessity, Urahara explained. By punching a hole through them, Ichigo has linked hell and the living world until the gates can repair themselves. That idiot, Yoruichi swore. Kurosaki-kun wouldn't have done that for no reason. Inoue reminded them. It was probably his last resort, and since the Shinigami blew up the gates before, thought it wouldn't be too bad. It doesn't matter why he did it. The fact is that he did, and now we have to deal with the fallout. Inoue, can you handle the additional influx of hell reishi? I'm trying, but it's like trying to keep the ground clean when someone's bleeding to death on it, Inoue muttered with a strained tone. Hold on, Inoue. Tessai. Hi, Urahara Dono. Kazuki, what are you doing? Yoruichi demanded. Tessai's going to set up a couple of barriers around the gates, to restrict the reishi flow. Hardened by the news, Inoue redoubled her efforts, doing her best to keep the living world's reishi from taking on hell's properties. Here you are, a new voice commented in satisfaction from a few feet behind her. Inoue stiffened as fear shot through her body. Hachi-kun. Disengage the technique, Inoue. Hachi's voice was calm, but urgent. Disengage, and run. But what about, you can't protect yourself while you're using that technique, Inoue. And if you die here, then you won't be able to protect the living world. Go. Inoue swallowed, but released the Soden Kishun. And then she focused her intent towards her Santen Kishun, and sped off towards the relative safety of the Urahara shop. Hell lazily watched her go. So, her name is Inoue, and she is the one who was capable of halting the assimilation. What an interesting power. I wonder, does she have control over the living world's reishi? Perhaps an offshoot of a Quincy. He paused for a moment in thought, then shook his head. No matter. Her soul will belong to me soon enough. Hachigan had heard enough. He swept his hand in front of his face, conjuring his hollow mask. Not wasting any time, He clapped his hands, creating over a dozen pillars to form a gigantic shield to the left of Hell. Ryubi no Joman. Oh, Hell observed the shield in interest. I've never heard of this barrier. It looks quite strong. He then noticed Hachi going through some additional motions. There's more. By all means, let's see your best. I wonder how it compares to the gates. Unnerved by Hell's nonchalant acceptance of his barriers, Hachi nevertheless summoned a great deal of his Raryoku to create a large black circular barrier, placed directly in front of Hell. Koko no Joman. Hell approached the barrier in curiosity. Interesting indeed. A one-way barrier, to allow attacks in while trapping the opponent and his attacks inside. Very nice. Yes, it could prove useful for fighting the Ryo. Please, do show me more. Seamlessly switching to another set of hand seals, Hachi promptly created several dozen small hexagonal barriers and put them together in a honeycomb structure. This one went behind Hell. Kigai no Joman. Hell inspected the latest barrier closely. I see. This is an attempt to create a powerful barrier that won't shatter all at once if part of it is compromised. And, oh, the barriers resonate with each other. Individually weak, but together quite strong. Very promising. It wouldn't surprise me if this barrier approached the strength of the gates themselves. Hachi smiled tightly at the compliment even as he conjured an obelisk and wings of fire, from which many planks combined to form long red wings. The wings promptly folded on each other, forming a circle with a large hole in the middle. Hachi placed it above Hell. Hoyoku no Joman. Hell looked at it with an expression of confusion and minor disappointment. While visually impressive, I don't see how useful this barrier is. It doesn't seem to hinder me in any way. The premier property of a phoenix is immortality, it will never die. In the same way, the property of the Hoyoku no Joman is that it reinforces other barriers and will restore them if damaged, Hachi stated calmly. He made a simple hand seal in front of his face with his left hand, and swung his right hand down. Shiju no Seiman. The 4 barriers that Hachi had created sparked with power, and a tinted prison-like cube barrier formed around Hell, with the 4 pre-existing barriers enforcing its power. You believe this will keep me here? Hell asked casually, approaching the wall to his right, the wall without one of the Joman. He leaned in and inspected it with a critical eye. Not permanently, Hachi admitted. Perhaps not even for very long. But long enough to perhaps move Karakura out of the way of your battle. He tapped his ear. Urahara-san, Hell is in the living world. Please activate the Tenkai Ketchu. Understood. Activation will require a few minutes. Please keep Hell occupied until then. You know, I find myself quite impressed, Hell admitted easily, placing his hand on the barrier and quickly withdrawing it when it sparked at him. Oh, very well done. A barrier capable of defending itself. In my time, barriers such as these could only be created by the Ryo. I never had the talent for them. Soul Society has come far from its humble beginnings. Hachi watched him carefully, uncertain. Hell was too calm, too at ease with his situation. A fully mastered Shiju no Seiman had never been conquered, to his knowledge. He'd even had it tested by the other Taicho-level wizard, had them attempt to destroy it with their Bankai. If Hell could break out of this barrier, then he simply had very few options. Let's suppose for a minute that you actually have successfully captured me, Hell suggested. The purpose of your, what was it again? Koko no Joman. Its purpose for this prison is to allow you to attack me without fear of retribution. So why aren't you attacking? Surely you know at least one good spell. Hachi did in fact know many powerful Hado. But he had always known his powers weren't suited to combat. Unlike Tessai Taicho, he'd never really mastered any of the branches of Hado. He could cast them, sure, but he still required the full incantation, and their strength still needed work. There was a reason he had only been the lieutenant of the Kido Corps, and after his escape to the living world Hachi had instead chosen to master his own brand of unique Kido. I know several, Hell. But none suitable for you. Oh, I know the results of Kurosaki Ichigo's conflict with you, and he is far faster, far stronger than I. Opening the Koko no Joman to allow my attack inside would give you a split-second opportunity to escape. Therefore, any attack I use should be capable of halting you or pushing you back, perhaps a spell with a suitably explosive impact. I even have such a spell in mind. But it is a spell I have not mastered yet. I could not guarantee that it would be strong enough to keep you in. So I will instead focus on keeping you trapped there for as long as I can, until a suitable method to deal with you is created. Hell's expression didn't falter in the slightest. In fact, he seemed pleased. Perceptive as well, and you know the limits of your own techniques. Yes, you will make a fine lieutenant when this world is absorbed. Hachi's eyes narrowed slightly behind his mask. This world will not be absorbed, Hell. I'm afraid that you are quite wrong. Hell slammed a fist into the wall of the Shiju no Seiman that he'd been examining, and it cracked audibly before beginning to repair itself. You see, I am in my dimension, and I am here. He struck it again, and the barrier cracked even more. Even if that were not enough, the gates of Hell are open. The door has been opened. Our worlds are linked. Hell took a step back and then shot forward with both his fists striking the barrier at the same time. At once, the Shiju no Seiman shattered. Hachi's mask crumbled in the wake of his shock, and he watched in thinly disguised horror as Hell turned to face him with a knowing smile. Can't you feel it? Can't you feel the resonance? Hell asked triumphantly. He raised an arm to the sky, and above him, a portal spiraled open, wider and wider, until it was approximately 30 meters wide. From within, Hachi could see hundreds, perhaps thousands of Togabito, waiting for the order. An order that Hell was only too happy to give. Attack. Kill the defenders of this world. At once, the Togabito began to swarm out of the portal. Hachi began quickly chanting the incantation for one of the most powerful Hado he knew, but he was startled when a black and white blur rushed past him with a battle cry. Getsuga Tensho. The crescent attack ripped into and through dozens of Togabito, sending their bodies falling to the ground below, only to be reclaimed by miniature portals. The remaining Togabito froze, unsure how to take this new threat. Ah, Kurosaki Ichigo, I was wondering when you'd join us, Hell greeted amenably. Ichigo, still in his Bankai and Resurrection, growled at Hell audibly. You're going back to your damned dimension, Hell. Of course I am. After all, when I'm through, this will be my dimension. Hell proclaimed. Do you really think you can stop me, and all the Togabito here, at the same time? Ichigo's eyes glowed with resolve. You're not the only one who can summon subordinates, Hell. Let me show you the difference between quantity and quality. He raised his face to the sky and let loose a piercing hollow scream. Within moments, 4 Garganta opened, and out came Ichigo's Arrancar allies, Ulquiorra, Neliel, Haribel, Stark and Lilinet. Ulquiorra kneeled in midair before Ichigo. How may we serve, Kurosaki-sama? Ichigo didn't even look at him, his gaze completely focused on Hell. Ulquiorra, take out the trash. Protect Karakura. Yes, my liege. Hell's confident expression faltered somewhat. You are the king of Hueco Mundo. Ichigo didn't answer. Instead, he addressed the wizard standing behind him. Hachi, can you get that portal closed? If I'm given time, Hachi answered, casting his eyes nervously on the situation. He'd never felt quite so outclassed before. Good, Neliel. Protect Hachi here while he works. Right, the former Espada Trace acknowledged, moving herself between Hell and the wizard. Hell just stared incredulously as Kurosaki Ichigo continued to give orders. This boy, was not a pure hollow. He wasn't even an Arrancar, but a wizard. And yet he was the king of Hueco Mundo. How had that happened? More importantly, how many more Arrancar could he summon? And how strong were the ones he'd called for? So Hell simply waited patiently, listening in case Kurosaki gave out any important information. Haribel. Yes. Ichigo's eyes still didn't leave Hell, but his voice softened just a little. Go. Find your friends and get them out. Just be careful of the effect of Hell's Reiatsu. If you find yourself becoming overly aggressive, get out as quickly as you can. If any Shinigami give you trouble, tell them I sent you. After you find them, go to the gates of Hell, my mother's there. Protect her with your life. Haribel's eyes widened, and then she nodded sharply. Yes, my liege. She vanished in a burst of sonido and zoomed into the portal, killing several Togabito on her way through. Ichigo tapped his ear where the interdimensional communicator was. Urahara, can you hear me? Loud and clear. What's the status? Keep it brief. Inoue was interrupted by Hell, and has retreated to my shop. I'm recalling Kuchiki to act as her support. Tessai is en route to the gates to do what he can. The portals from hell, excluding the one you're at, have ceased, and everyone is busy finishing off their current opponents. Resonance with hell has begun. Dimensional instability has made transference to Soul Society virtually impossible at this time. Got it. When Tessai's done over there, send him our way to help Hachi. Understood. Any special instructions for us? Stark asked mildly. Be ready to aid me when I give the signal. What's the signal? You'll know it when you see it. Stark sighed but nodded. I should have known better than to ask. No one moved for a moment. The orders had been given, and each side was waiting for the other to act first. Then Ulquiorra broke the silence by unleashing his full power and jumping straight into Resurrección Segunda Etapa, generating a Lanza del Relámpago. Chains up. One of the Togabito, presumably a commander, shouted. The countless soldiers manifested the chains that bound them to hell and held it before them defensively, forming an enormous barrier that should have been considered impenetrable. Ulquiorra took a moment to aim, and then flung the javelin above the front line's heads and chains. HMPH. He missed, Hell commented derisively. Just then, a massive teal explosion surged from within Hell, reaching and engulfing the vast majority of the Togabito. When the dust settled, a good half of Hell's forces were obliterated, dead or dying. Broken chains littered the landscape for a few precious moments before disintegrating into nothing. Ichigo's eyes never left Hell, but a fierce smirk grew beneath his mask. Would you care to revise your opinion? Chad staggered back from another punishing blow from Kiryu. The Togabito was frighteningly fast, and had strength in spades despite only appearing somewhat healthier than his first starved appearance. It didn't help that his chains had been loosened so Kiryu could actually make proper fists and use the chains as knuckle dusters. Kiryu pressed his assault, but Chad brought his Brazo Derecha del Gigante up to deflect the attack and twist it away. Not for the first time, Chad mentally thanked Yoruichi for helping teach him better footwork and his high-speed technique. Even so, as much as he hated to admit it, he was losing this battle. He hadn't even managed to land a single punch on Kiryu. You're quite strong, for a human, Kiryu admitted. Not many could stand up to me during Hell's first invasion. Then again, I am still recovering from Hell's punishment, he shrugged and moved out of a fighting stance. It's too bad that you've already lost. What? Chad spared a split second to glance at the school he'd been defending. It was still untouched from their battle. What are you talking about? Kiryu sighed. Hell has entered the living world, and the gates are open. I can feel them, just as I can feel that the living world's reishi is no longer being changed back to normal. Surely you can feel it now. To Chad's horror, he could. The air was noticeably thicker, was tangibly more, filled with malice. No, he whispered. This can't be. I'm sorry, Sato-kun. But there's no point in fighting anymore. In a few minutes, the first humans will be affected by Hell's Reiatsu. Will they go insane and fight their fellow man? Or will they simply drop dead? I don't know, but it's over. If you want to maintain a human existence, then you should run and find a place to hide. Chad grit his teeth. No, he wouldn't run, not when so many were unknowingly counting on him, on his friends. With a thought and brief exertion of focus, he materialized the Raraku. It took mere moments for him to identify ribbons he was looking for. He grasped them all, and focused on the information they contained. Inoue was alive, but her Reiatsu echoed with fear and guilt. She was at Urahara's shop, probably trying to find a way to help since the plan had fallen to pieces. Ishida was alive, wounded lightly, but coldly determined. He was not far away, still in the middle of battle with Hana. Ichigo was in the living world, high in the air. That made Chad feel immeasurably relieved, until he realized that Hell was in the living world too. Ichigo was almost certainly facing him. Chad quickly felt his way through the rest of the Raraku in the area with a sinking heart. Ichigo was with a few hollows, including one who Chad thought might be Ulquiorra, but there were so many strong Togabito there. Ichigo was strong, but, if Chad was having this much trouble with just one, how would Ichigo against this many? Ichigo was stronger than he was. Maybe this many Togabito were truly nothing to him now. Maybe it'd be better if Chad just stayed out the way. Maybe Chad would only be a burden. He certainly felt like one, not being able to defeat even this one Togabito. Maybe the only thing he was good for was stalling for time, What was he thinking? Why was he acting as if it were a possibility to let Ichigo fight alone if he could help it? Ichigo needed him. It didn't matter if Ichigo had grown 10 times, 100 times, even 1,000 times stronger than him. They'd sworn to fight for each other, to protect one another. If Chad gave up on being able to fight at Ichigo's side as he'd vowed, on using his incredible strength to protect others as his grandfather had taught him, then he would never be able to meet Ichigo's eyes again. No, he would finish his fight with Kiryu swiftly, and help Ichigo. He would not break his oaths. His pride demanded it. As if by instinct, Chad reached for the coin he regarded as more important than his own life. He knew what he had to do. He knew his duty. His fingers touched the coin, and light flashed. Kiryu covered his eyes, momentarily blinded. When he could see again, he looked curiously at the human he'd been fighting. Before, the teenager had only manifested armor on his arms. Now, it seemed, he'd finished the job. His whole body, save his head, was covered in armor. The armor from Chad's waist up was the very dark red of Carmine, with a large white stylized rose emblazoned in the center of his chest. Chad's legs were black, with the strips of the same dark red running down the sides. Kiryu watched curiously as his opponent moved experimentally, taking a few careful steps and twisting his upper body. The armor did not seem to inhibit his movement in the slightest. "Congratulations on your new power," Kiryu commented. "Have you got a name for it yet, or is it simply an extension of what you had before?" "Yes, I have a name for it." Chad met his opponent's eyes again. "El Deber del Corazon. I'm sorry, but my friend needs me. I can't afford to waste any more time on you." He took a step, and green light flickered for the briefest instant before he launched forward with far more speed than he'd had a few minutes prior. Kiryu's eyes widened and brought his chain-clad arms up to block a punch from Chad's left arm, but much to his shock he was sent flying anyway. Chad chased after him silently, catching him with his left arm and cocking a punch with his glowing right arm. "El Directo," he cried out as he landed a strike to Kiryu's gut from underneath. The energy blasted through Kiryu completely, obliterating his insides and sending a column of spiritual energy blasting into the sky. The moment it faded, Chad dropped Kiryu to the ground. He reached down and took a handful of Kiryu's chains with both hands. With a grunt of effort, he broke them, and was gratified to see the remainder of Kiryu's chains began to vanish. You can break the chains," Kiryu gasped, coughing out blood. Chad ignored him and began charging power to his Brazo Izquierda del Diablo, preparing his strongest attack. "Sorry, I can't risk you recovering. May you find peace in your next life. I pray hell doesn't reclaim your soul again." "I understand." Kiryu hacked out more blood. "Make it quick." Chad nodded and pulled back his fist. Lemuert. Kiryu's body was instantly crushed. Chad didn't waste any time waiting to see if Hell's portal reclaimed his soul or not. He was needed elsewhere. He could sense that Ishida was finishing with his opponent as well. It was time to go to Ichigo. Hell leapt back away from Yamamoto as the latter swung Zenka no Tachi yet again, unleashing an impossibly hot wave of concentrated fire and heat that would have utterly destroyed him if he'd caught even a sliver of it. "What happened to you to drag you to this level of power?" Hell questioned in utter disbelief. And then Yamamoto vanished. "More than you will ever know," his voice uttered darkly from directly behind Hell. Flickering away in a high-speed technique, Hell gathered his power to his Zanpakuto. "Asahi no Kagami," he commanded, and light flashed off the blade. Yet Yamamoto's attention didn't sway in the slightest, and Hell could feel that the illusion had failed to take hold. It had broken in the same instant that it had landed on his opponent. A flicker of frustration flashed across his face. "It seems Asahi no Kagami won't affect you. All techniques have a counter, and I know the ability of Asahi no Kagami," Yamamoto stated calmly. "It searches for conflicts within the spirit. Conflicts between the heart and the mind, no matter how old, no matter how well lived with. In effect, it makes the opponent his own worst enemy, for everyone lies to themselves. Everyone knows what it means to delude themselves in order to go on with life, to justify the reprehensible. But the counter to your ability is laughably simple, Hell. To understand all you have done, to accept who you are. To have your heart and mind in accord." Yamamoto let loose a vicious smile. "Do you know how I spent my time preparing for you? I came here knowing the likelihood of my demise, so I spent my time settling my affairs. I spent it reflecting on myself, understanding my own decisions and the ones of those around me. I spent it resolving conflicts both present and future. I spent it forgiving myself. I have no regrets. I have done all I can. And with that knowledge behind me, you have no power over me. Hell remained silent for another moment, then opened his mouth to speak. You are becoming very annoying, Yamamoto Sotaicho. Very well. If I cannot have you destroy yourself, then I shall have to do the job myself. Hell disappeared in a burst of high-speed moment, and reappeared inside Yamamoto's guard, Asahi no Kagami already in motion. Hell completed the slash without any resistance, but winced when he heard Asahi no Kagami shriek in pain. Instinct alone saved him from a retaliatory strike from Zenka no Tachi as he flashed away once again, bringing his blade to bear. Or rather, what was left of his blade. Asahi no Kagami was now nothing more than a short stub of metal on a hilt. What? Hell whispered. How? Yamamoto could not help but bubble of pleased satisfaction that settled in his chest. Can't you tell? Oh hell. I thought this was your world. Tell me, what does your world tell you about me? Hell narrowed his eyes. I see. Your Bankai is not merely your sword, it is your whole self. Your body is wreathed in truly impressive heat. I wonder how it is not visible to the naked eye. Well then, since you asked, I guess I will make it visible to your eyes as well. Yamamoto took a single breath and, after a prolonged moment, exhaled. The invisible heat that surrounded Yamamoto's form was suddenly visible, shifting and writhing like fire, yet never growing too far from his body. Zanka no Tachi, West, Zanjutsu Gokui. Its heat reaches 15 million degrees. You might say that when I'm using my Bankai, it's as if my body and blade are clad in the flames of the sun. Hell paused to let that sink in. You are a terrifying old man, he admitted. Such heat could not possibly appear in the form of flames, that fire is your Reiatsu. It was invisible because you willed it to be. And now I see it because you have allowed me to. And yet you are not weakening in the slightest. With power such as that, you might as well be a god yourself. I find myself wanting to either laugh at the foolishness of any mortal willing to go against you, or fearful of the kind of powers that made that possible. Hell chuckled and shook his head. I cannot attack your body, nor can I attack your heart and mind. However, I wonder, how long can you maintain your Bankai under a constant assault? He extended his free hand, fingers splayed wide with the palm facing the desert sands. Souls, you whose forms have decayed, you who were blinded by the light of your own sins, I offer you a chance for redemption. If you would see the light of day once again, arise and take arms. Yamamoto watched silently as the desert itself lurched, sands flying in every direction, obscuring his vision for several moments. When the air cleared, Yamamoto was facing an army of hundreds, of thousands of men of every race and creed. Some wielded gigantic weapons, some went barehanded, and still others were visibly preparing magics of some sort. Standing above them was Hell himself. Tell me, Yamamoto, Sotaicho of the Gote 13, can you destroy an army of Togabito and still defeat me? And then Yamamoto could hold it no longer, he let out a derisive snort. You call that an army? Let me show you how it's done. He planted the tip of Zenka no Tachi into the desert sands. Corpses, ashes of the dead, scattered by my flames. Lend me your aid, for a spell I shall grant you the pleasure of battle. The ground rumbled as a great rift opened in the desert, ash erupting out of it as though it were a small volcano. The ash swept across the land and took shape, forming countless skeletal warriors for as far as the eye could see. Yamamoto met Hell's eyes, taking pride and satisfaction at the dumbfounded expression on Hell's face. Zanka no Tachi, South, Kaka Jumanokushi Daisojin. It took Hell a moment, but he managed to regain his voice. Your Bankai gives you an impressive offense, a virtually perfect defense that destroys all that dares draw near, and the ability to summon your dead enemies as skeletons of ash to fight for you. He shook his head with a chuckle. It's ludicrous to think of you as a mere Shinigami. Your Reiatsu lies on the border of transcendence. And here I thought I wouldn't have a real challenge until I reached the Ryo. Enough talk. Yamamoto commanded sharply and pointed Zenka no Tachi at the army before him. The countless skeletons rushed towards the force of Togabito, and the battle was begun. No Togabito will distract me. No attack will phase me. No defense will stop me. I came here to end the threat you pose to all the worlds, and you will not escape me. Chapter 75. On the front line. Hell stared at Ichigo with an unreadable expression while Ulquiorra methodically destroyed every Togabito that had been waiting to invade the living world. I must ask, why isn't he eating any of the Togabito's souls? He asked calmly. Too risky, Ichigo answered in the same tone. Too much chance of accidentally inheriting their chains and being enslaved to you. If anything, Hell's scrutiny increased. Did he determine this himself? I warned all the Arrancar and Vasto Lord. I believe seeing Grimmjow confirmed it for Ulquiorra, at least. Ichigo paused. That is what happened to Grimmjow, isn't it? Hell snorted. Of course it is. He saw an opportunity to gain more power and took it. Well, that explains why the number of hollows of acquired from Hueco Mundo has been practically non-existent, at least. You've proven more intelligent and capable than I expected. But even so, you're at a disadvantage here. Ichigo was glad that his mask hid his expression so well. It meant all he had to do was maintain a calm tone of voice. How so? Your goal is to protect this world, correct? That means that you cannot use your full power, or this city will be leveled in our battle, Hell pointed out. The same applies to you, Ichigo retorted. You want the living world's souls to augment your own forces. Hardly, Hell disagreed. Do you realize how long it takes to train a soul to be able to use my chains in anything approaching a combat situation? I don't care about the people of this world. I just want this world. Once I have Hueco Mundo and Soul Society, then I'll have all the souls anyway. Ichigo went quiet for a moment. So, you have nothing stopping you from all your power to crush us right now. That's right, Ichigo nodded, seemingly coming to a decision. Stark, Resurrection, and get behind him. Understood. Come, Lilinet. Stark and his Frashion stood closer together, and Stark laid a hand on her head gently. Kick about, Los Lobos. Hell blinked as he witnessed the two Arrancar being a complete being once more before vanishing in an impressive display of sonido. What was the point of that? He asked, with just the slightest bit of derision coloring his tone. I already know that you are hampered with the burden of protecting the people of this world. This show of force is useless. It's not a show of force. It's simple logic. If you attack me, then your back will be open to an attack from Stark. If you attack Stark, then your back will be open to an attack from me. And neither of us will hold back. And what happens if I ignore the both of you and decide to attack Karakura directly? Hell asked. Will you both attack me and forsake Karakura? They won't need to forsake it. Hell turned to one side to see Ishida standing in midair, his bow at the ready. A Quincy, Hell observed. Yes, surely by now you've noticed. There are no more Togabito in the living world. And no more portals are opening. What of it? That means that all the defenders of this world are free to defend against you. Inoue's voice cut in, and everyone turned to where she was. Standing atop her Santon Keshun several meters away, Inoue's expression was calm, but determined as she turned to look at Ichigo. Karakura is safe, Kurosaki-kun. How can I help? Ichigo was about to ask her to retreat to a safe distance, but then Chad's hand clapped onto his shoulder. Ichigo twisted his neck to face him. Looking into Ichigo's mask, Chad remained unafraid. Ichigo, this is not just your fight. We are here to support you. That's right, Kurosaki. Ishida locked eyes with Ichigo. You've obviously got a plan, or else you would have attacked him by now. So tell us how to help. Ichigo's eyes went wide behind his mask for a moment, and felt his grip on hollowification tremble under the weight of his emotion. Against his will, he remembered the illusions Asahi no Kagami had turned upon him, and the lessons imparted by them. He couldn't let pride keep him from accepting help. He had to trust in his companions, and allow them to make their own decisions. Inoue, Chad, Ishida, Ichigo took a breath and steadied himself. Thank you. Hell laughed lowly. What a lovely scene, worthy of any play, but you are fools for gathering here. He drew the sword at his hip. Reveal the truth, Asahi no Kagami. Inoue, use your Soden Kishun over all of us. Ichigo ordered. Reject all illusions and keep Hell from leaving. Chad, protect her. Hi. The two answered. Almost instantly, a golden bubble materialized over them all, excluding the open portal to Hell, Neliel and Hachi. All the illusions that had begun to take form dissipated as Inoue negated Asahi's power. Ichigo was about to give more orders, but he was interrupted by Hell directly attacking Ishida. "Stark!" he cried out, flashing into Sonido. Stark whipped one of his guns in position, and fired a powerful Sero without any charge time. The Sero rocketed into the space that Hell would have been, had he not stopped just shy of it to bring his blade to defend against Tensa Zangetsu. Ichigo was instantly hit with a flash of familiarity, but there was no time to deal with it then. Ishida immediately took advantage of the blatant opportunity and promptly fired a couple of dozen arrows into Hell's back simultaneously before using Harenkyaku to retreat to a safer distance. He frowned when he saw that Hell didn't even seem to register the attack. It would seem he'd need to use strong individual attacks rather than a number of weaker ones, or perhaps he'd just need more of them. Ichigo and Hell swiped at each other in a flurry of high-speed attacks, with neither giving ground, until another Sero materialized without warning and slammed into Hell's side, blasting him several meters away from Ichigo, and well away from anyone else. No orders were needed. All at once, several ranged attacks were launched. El Directo, Licht Region, Sero Metroletta, Getsuga Tensho. The onslaught was too large and too fast for Hell to avoid, but much to Ichigo's frustration, Hell had another trick up his sleeve. He swiped the air in front of him and wordlessly conjured a tall translucent barrier just in time for it to take on the combined attacks, which impacted with an explosion that whipped the air around Ichigo and his companions. When the smoke dissipated, the barrier was gone, but Hell was hardly injured. Some scratches and small rips in clothes were the only evidence of the power behind the attack. "Damn," Ichigo cursed. "I thought we had him there. Did you really think that the only tool at my disposal was Asahi no Kagami?" Hell asked with a trace of amusement. "It would have been very foolish indeed not to have a means of defending myself against such an attack." Ishida readjusted his glasses as he reassessed the situation. Obviously overwhelming that barrier from a single direction isn't a feasible way to defeat him. Perhaps if we can force him to stretch it out, attack from multiple directions at once. We'll need to hold him in place, though, so we don't accidentally attack each other, he proposed. Stark nodded. "I have a technique like that." He holstered his pistols, and they disappeared. An instant later, a pack of gray wolves materialized at his side. "Let's finish this, Stark." Lilinette's quiet but resolved voice came out of Stark's mouth. The wolves rushed Hell, who was staring wide-eyed at the technique. You just split your soul." Hell gasped in shock. "Just like that. What are you?" Stark didn't answer. "Kurosaki-sama, Ishida-san, if you possess a technique that will encase him and a few of my wolves, use it the instant the wolves bite." Ichigo, who had been staring at Stark in surprise, recovered and nodded at him, and then Ishida. They leapt in opposite directions, circling around Hell. Dodging with high speed, Hell swiped at one of the wolves with Asahi no Kagami, only to see the wolf reform without being hindered in the slightest. After a few more moments, he found himself surrounded. With gritted teeth, he conjured his barrier again, and completely wrapped himself in it to keep from being bitten while he tried to think of another plan. "Tsubaki, Koden Zanshin, I reject." Hell blinked and twisted to look at the girl who was maintaining the curious oval-shaped barrier. He turned just in time to see a black-winged projectile of some sort pierce through his barrier like it wasn't even there. And much to his shock, the barrier completely collapsed an instant later. Just as several wolves attached themselves to Hell's limbs and began to glow, Ishida threw a silver vial at Hell. A silver rod strikes the five-fingered stone bed, grits. A large stone prison materialized around Hell and the wolves. Ichigo raised his left arm and concentrated hard, summoning a large length of chains that he promptly directed to wrap around the grits, reinforcing it. It was not a moment too soon, either, as the grits practically disintegrated under the force of the explosion of several wolves. The chains went a few instants later, but it was enough to redirect most of the remaining force upwards, utterly shattering the Soten Kishun. Inoue promptly collapsed onto her Santen Keshun, and even that technique was beginning to fracture. "Orihime," Ishida cried out, and quickly appeared next to her with a burst of Harenkyaku. The Santen Keshun shattered as well, but Chad had already picked her up in his arms. "Inoue, are you all right?" Chad asked. "I'm okay, Oryu," Sato-kun, she muttered. Just tired. Sorry. Don't worry, Hachi declared calmly as he approached with Neliel and Ulquiorra just a few steps behind. She's just used a lot of Raryoku. A bit of healing Kido and she'll be back on her feet. Hachi, Ichigo's voice drifted back towards them as the smoke from the explosion began to dissipate. Good job on closing the portal. Take care of Inoue, and when she's able, you two should work on getting the living world's reishi back to normal. Inoue, his voice softened. Thanks for your help. If it weren't for your Soden Kishun, Hell's illusions would have made things a lot more difficult. Inoue smiled, and then let exhaustion take her, passing out. Chad passed her to Hachi, who nodded and vanished in a burst of shunpo. I'll admit, that nearly killed me, Hell said as the smoke finished clearing. His clothes were little more than rags, but he seemed completely unharmed otherwise. But you really shouldn't have given me time to heal. Ichigo grit his teeth. It had been a calculated risk to leave Hell alone in the smoke. Inoue had needed immediate attention, and without her barriers insulating the fight, further use of the powerful techniques needed to finish Hell off endangered the living world. Ichigo had figured that Hell was taking the time to heal properly, but the wizard had wanted to give Zuni his opportunity to get that portal open. Come on, he muttered impatiently. Orders, my liege, Ulquiorra asked quietly. Ichigo shook his head. He had made his decision to put his trust in Zuni. He needed to stall for time. Well, he might as well get some answers. Aizen had certainly liked to monologue, maybe Hell would too. He exited Resurrection and removed his mask to conserve his power for when the fighting would begin again. So, Hell, tell me, does the name Ayumu mean anything to you? Hell's face betrayed nothing. There have been many people called by that name. Is there one in particular you wanted to know about? Ichigo, Chad muttered. What are you doing? In a minute, Chad. How about one that's friends with a guy named Akio? Hell's eyes narrowed. You had some discussions about the nature of the human soul, about the balance between conflict and peace, and how to punish souls that were evil in life. Ichigo pressed, his suspicions leaping to the fore at seeing Hell's reaction. Has it been so long that you can't remember those days with your best friend? Has it been so long since you remembered your dream, Ayumu? Hell's face closed off, denying any semblance of emotion in his expression. So, you know, how I've been having these dreams, reliving these memories, your memories. Ichigo yelled. I don't know how your memories got into my head. All I know is that you dreamt of turning the hearts of men, and bringing lasting peace to all the worlds. He roared angrily. Look at you now. Akio taught you how to open the world of your heart to rehabilitate the wicked. And now you're a conqueror of worlds. I was a fool. Human nature cannot be denied, Ayumu retorted derisively. You cannot fathom how many souls I have communed with, how many lives I've witnessed, how much evil lies within the human spirit. Do not presume to judge me, Kurosaki Ichigo. When you have looked through a million sets of eyes, lived a million lives, only then will you know a fraction of what I have experienced. Do you think I care about that? Ichigo snapped. Akio warned you about the possible consequences. He told you that there was a chance that your world would just turn into a prison, and you its warden. Ayumu inclined his head slightly, conceding the point. Very true. But what Akio did not predict, was that I would learn to wholly understand the truth of humanity. The truth of humanity, Chad repeated, his own eyes narrowed. Yes, I had always known that humanity was flawed. I had always known that people's motivations weren't always pure and good, but I had always thought that if people could understand each other, could empathize with each other, then humanity could move past pointless violence, could learn to live together in peace and work together towards a better future. Humanity still wouldn't be perfect, but it would be better. So what went wrong? Ichigo asked quietly. At first, it wasn't so bad, Ayumu reminisced with an almost fond tone. Most would learn what they needed in order to live a peaceful life. Many of them just needed a friend, someone who understood them, someone they could confide in without judgment. It gave me hope. Of course, some were utterly unrepentant, some were bloodthirsty killers, some were, well, the irredeemable were many and varied. Them, I imprisoned within my realm for eternity. Eventually, I was sure, the only humans in the reincarnation cycle would be good ones at heart. But things never changed as time went on. The same stories, the same tragedies, the same evils kept repeating themselves in greater and greater numbers. I lost count of how many times, how many ways I checked to ensure that those evil souls had not escaped me, were not influencing others in any way. Ayumu's fists clenched with rage. They weren't. It was then that I figured it out. The truth of humanity, sharing, empathy, caring, those are learned, and not everyone can grasp them, or even wants to. But greed, and pride, and selfishness is inherent within every human being. People justify their actions to make their hypocrisy more livable, to allow their own selfishness while damning others for the same. All those years, I had been treating the symptoms, not the cause. Ayumu's face twisted into a smile that was utterly without mirth, a smile that sent a chill down Ichigo's spine. It was suddenly so clear what I had to do. I had to cut out the root of the problem, the part of humanity that leads us to temptation. But Akio refused. He claimed that to mutilate the human soul like that would leave them incapable of growing beyond what they were. He couldn't see that there was no point. All the so-called growth of humans, the stories remained the same. Rape, murder, torture of the mind, of the body, of the spirit. Desperate acts of desperate men. Ayumu flared his reiatsu, turning murderous eyes upon the people before him. These crimes against fellow man and woman have existed since the beginning, and they happen today. Why is it that with this bountiful planet, you have people dying of hunger and others of gluttony? Exclamation mark. Why is it that with this giant world, you have men with enough land to house 100 comfortably, and others who are forced to live with no home? Why is it that those with the resources and intelligence to cure terrible disease refuse to unless they can make a profit? If you humans had truly grown, you would have begun to understand one another. If you humans had truly grown, you wouldn't be so enamored with power. He roared, increasing his reiatsu output immensely with his anger. Ichigo nearly swallowed his tongue as the enormous pressure hit him. He hadn't been prepared for it. He'd thought that he wouldn't be able to feel Ayumu's reiatsu, since Ayumu's reiryoku was more evolved than his own. So, either Ichigo had grown more transcendent, enough to be able to feel Ayumu, or Ichigo took a moment to glance at his companions. Given their grimaces, Ichigo realized that Ayumu had lowered his reiatsu to a level that anyone could feel it. Ichigo returned his gaze to Ayumu, who was calming down. Surely you can see the same truth I do. Humans are a selfish, flawed species that can never, will never achieve paradise on their own. Your own nature fights you. I want to change that. That is the reason I fight, that is the reason I am here. His voice softened, taking on a reassuring, almost pleading tone. Join me, and I will help you. I will remove those parts of you that can conceive of evil. I will help you achieve world peace, eliminate all crime. Imagine a world where people understand each other, where people no longer judge and scheme against each other, where war and hate have no meaning, where despair is a foreign concept. Help me, and I swear to you I will help you. Hearing the sincerity in Ayumu's plea, Ichigo's lips and throat went dry. Such a world, it sounded almost perfect. But, something about the offer just seemed wrong somehow. Ichigo, Chad seemed at a loss for words. Ichigo looked at him with equally conflicted eyes, and finally Chad seemed to gather his words. What he's saying, it reminds me of my abuelo. He always encouraged me to use my arms to protect others. Chad turned to address Ayumu. You would take away my desire to hurt others, right? Exactly. But, I channel that desire into my left arm, and I've used it to protect others. What is better, to be born perfect, or overcome your flawed nature through great effort? Ayumu was visibly startled by the question, but before he could formulate a response, Stark jumped in. I remember being alone. So terribly alone, because the strength of my power killed those who came close to me. I remember cursing my strength, lamenting not being weak. But Ayumu, that loneliness has helped me to treasure the friends I have found. So I do not regret my years of loneliness, for now I know the true value of companionship. Ulquiorra didn't even give Ayumu the chance to look at the former Primera. I have known true despair. That crushing, overwhelming feeling was not pleasant, but through it, and my conversations with others, I am beginning to comprehend hope, and why humans treasure it. I still do not understand the human heart, but I feel that if I am given time, one day I will. I don't like fighting, Neliel said quietly. I never have. A world where we don't need to fight, Where people understand each other, your world is tempting. But when I fought under Aizen, I learned to treasure the people I had come to hold as family. Yes, they were different, as I must have been to them. But we loved each other all the more for it, because we had come to understand each other. Can't you see, Ayumu? We grew close through trying circumstances that wouldn't exist in your world, and I wouldn't trade Dondochaka and Peshi for anything. I harbor hate in my heart, Ishida admitted calmly, steadily. Hate for a man who used his power to have my grandfather killed, and then tortured his soul. I have to remind myself of the potential consequences of killing him every time I even think his name. But if you remove the ability to hate, then you cheapen the gift of love, of forgiveness. You take away the ability for a human to make meaningful choices. Like Sato-kun said, it is our flawed nature that gives our actions worth. His resolve restored, Ichigo pointed Tensa Zangetsu at Ayumu accusingly. This is what Akio meant when he talked about growing beyond what we were. Our experiences, the things we've learned, we pass them on to our children, and our children's children. You say that humans haven't grown. That we cannot learn to understand each other. Look at the world below you. Human civilization has grown so far past what we used to be. The people of this world have never been more connected, so don't you dare claim that we lack empathy. Yes, we still have problems, but what you could never accept is that it is our imperfection that gives our lives meaning. Are you all right? Zani opened his eyes from where he was sitting cross-legged just in time to watch Masaki shoot yet another Togabito attempting to escape through the gates. They'd started coming in droves within minutes of the gates opening, but thus far Masaki had had no trouble at all dispatching them long before they ever got close. I'm fine. I'm just having trouble getting a portal established. Hell's still restricting that ability, and it doesn't help that I've never opened one myself. It can't be that different from opening a Garganta, Masaki commented with a frown. I mean, they're both rips in the fabric of space. Zani shifted slightly. Yes and no. See, a Garganta is an opening to the void between worlds, and from there you can go where you like. But these hell portals, they're more than that. It's a direct connection between two worlds. A sympathetic connection of similar energy. Like how water droplets attract each other, if they're close enough. The trick is getting them close enough for the attraction to happen. Masaki took a moment to survey whether any new Togabito was coming. Determining that they were safe for the moment, she sat in front of Zani, curious. So, how do you do that? I have to sort of push the hell dimension's energy towards where I want to go. Problem is that there's a rubber band effect. The further out I push, the more it resists. But the living world is right there, Masaki pointed out, pointing at the open gates. Zani nodded. Right, and that's the only reason I'm making progress at all. Hell's making it very difficult to open a portal from here. I could probably make a portal from the living world to this dimension in a heartbeat, but going the other way's not easy when I'm going directly against the ruler's will. Masaki turned that over in her head for a moment, before nodding in understanding. Am I distracting you too much? Not really. I'm pretty close to the connection, but I need a few minutes to recover more power from hell anyway to make the last push. Zani gestured towards his chains. Only good thing about these chains, I can passively drain him of power. Without shifting from her sitting position, or even looking away from Zani, Masaki created an arrow and shot a Togabito who was making a sprint for the exit. So, I don't suppose you're going to tell me what part of Ichigo you are. Since Ichigo apparently has figured it out and all, telling me no longer risks whether he'll accept you back. Zani gave her the saddest smile Masaki had ever seen, and she could feel her heart twist on seeing it. Are you sure you want to know? The answer will do you no favors, he warned. By learning this truth, you will see a dark side to Ichigo, one that he now knows he must live with for the rest of his life. I know he would rather it be kept quiet. But I also know that if you asked him, he would tell you. That is the only reason I am even considering telling you. Masaki was quiet for a minute. Will knowing allow me to help my son? Yes, but not in the way you think. Zani shook his head. Ichigo knows what I am. That means he knows himself that much more. What he does with that knowledge, is up to him. But if you know what I am, and can acknowledge and love him still, then that would be the greatest gift you could ever give him. He let another smile, wistful this time, across his face. It might even be enough to banish the rain permanently. Masaki blinked, completely thrown off by the last comment. Rain. Zani shook his head, refusing to expand on the topic. If I tell you this secret, you will have the power to support Ichigo, or utterly destroy him. Masaki smiled back at Zani as she finally understood what he was doing. You're trying to protect him, aren't you? That's the real reason why you're explaining all this. It's so I don't just ask Ichigo, and hurt him. The Togabito chuckled. Yeah, you're definitely perceptive when you know what to look for. His face sobered, then, and he fixed Masaki with a piercing look. So, do you want me to tell you? Masaki shook her head negatively and stood. I will always love my son. I would never purposely hurt him unless it was unavoidable. And I do want to know, but, she smiled down at Zani. My Ichigo's all grown up. I need to trust that he'll tell me the important things, when he's ready for me to know. Whatever you are, he trusts you enough to entrust my care to you. Don't even try denying it. I saw the look you two shared, she scolded when Zani opened his mouth to interrupt. I wasn't going to deny it, Zani replied quietly. I was going to say thank you. Masaki went very still. There was something very final about his tone. Zani, what's wrong? When Ichigo gets here, tell him that I was glad I could work with him one last time, Zani continued, ignoring Masaki's question. It felt good to work together without even trying. To be completely understood and accepted. It reminded me of when we were one. Zani, you are not going to die here, Masaki stated firmly, with as much authority as she could muster. No, I'm not. Zani's smile held no mirth, just a bizarre combination of regret and satisfaction. I'm not surprised you haven't noticed. He lifted one arm, and Masaki saw, to her confusion, that the wrist where chains had dangled only a few minutes before, were completely bare. Hell's released me. He must have noticed I was draining him more than usual. But, that's a good thing, isn't it? Masaki cried out. That means he doesn't have any control over you anymore. Have you forgotten? I relied on the influx of Raryoku from Hell to exist once Ichigo rejected me. Now that Hell's not providing any more Raryoku, I no longer have a strong enough soul attached to me to support my continued existence. I'm going to fade away in a few minutes. You're a Quincy. You should be able to feel my form destabilizing. With wide eyes, Masaki realized that she could indeed feel that very thing happening. But won't that mean you'll return to Ichigo's soul? Zani shook his head no. We never rejoined, he said simply. My consciousness will dissipate. The part of Ichigo's soul I harbor will probably go back to him, but me, Zani chuckled depreciatingly. It doesn't matter. This body, this personality, it is merely a manifestation, a collection of Ichigo's desires and motivations. My death isn't really the right word, is it? My existence ending won't hurt Ichigo at all, so don't worry about that. Masaki was struck by Zani's expression, then. Never had Zani more resembled her son than in that moment, and in that instant it really hit her that Zani was Ichigo. A manifestation, a collection of Ichigo's desires and motivations, she echoed, her eyes widening in shock. All Ichigo's ever wanted is to, you are. Zani graced her with the tiniest of knowing smiles. Figured it out, have you? Masaki stared at him as the dots connected. So, that's the reason you've been protecting me all along. It was never really about how Ichigo hurt you at all. It was never about becoming one with him again. You had no ulterior motive, you just wanted to protect me. That's what you meant when you said that you had your pride, that you remembered where you came from. Yep, it would have been nice to go back to being one with Ichigo, but it simply wasn't as important as you are. All those fights with Ichigo, those were just to get him as ready as I could. It was only towards the end that I began to hope that maybe we would actually end up one again. Zani laughed bitterly. We just have rotten luck, I guess. Ichigo finally understands me, finally accepts me, but there just wasn't time. Oh well. The soul fragment got to his feet with some difficulty. What are you doing? Masaki asked, still stunned by the revelation. Opening the portal. You're gonna want to move back a bit. I'll be gone in a minute, but I'll be damned if I don't help against Hell. Zani raised his arms above his head and tensed, gathering the remains of his energy. Oh no you don't, Masaki ordered sternly. Don't try and stop me. Zani yelled at her. This has to be done and you know it. Get back, and hide. No. Masaki stepped forward and placed a hand over Zeni's heart. You need power to continue existing, right? In case you've forgotten, I'm a Quincy. More than that, you are my son. You will survive. Masaki began to glow bright blue, and Zeni watched, awestruck, as she began absorbing more and more reishi from around her. And then Zeni felt Raryoku enter him, felt his form begin to stabilize. But, how? Did you think Shinigami were the only ones who could give Raryoku to others? Masaki answered with a smirk. Or perhaps you thought that Quincy's could only take it? Well, Masaki shook her head and smiled at him. I promise you, Zeni. You will survive to rejoin Ichigo. Now open the portal. Zeni was quiet for a moment, and then he began to laugh. We never really had a chance, did we? He couldn't help but say, still laughing. Between you and Dad, there just was no avoiding that stubborn compulsion to help and protect everyone. All right then, I hope you're ready for this, Ichigo. And with a monumental effort, he opened the portal above them both. So, you have made your decision. Ayumu had looked troubled, but now resolve was the only thing visible in his eyes. Very well, I shall have to, what? Ayumu whirled in shock as a wide portal unexpectedly opened right behind him. What the? Now, everyone, Ichigo roared, ripping on his mask and gathering power in his left hand. We've got to push him through. The sounds of everyone using their techniques at once overlapped each other. But Ichigo flashed into motion, dashing alongside the attacks. He knew that Ayumu would use his barrier to weather the assault. The only way to get Ayumu back to hell was to drag him there himself. The attacks hit a shimmering barrier. As Ichigo expected, Ayumu managed to get his technique up in time. And also as he expected, Ayumu was completely unprepared for chains to envelop him, barrier and all, a moment later. With a massive yank, Ichigo pulled Ayumu after him into hell. The moment Ayumu crossed the threshold, Ichigo dissipated the chains and let Ayumu's momentum send him flying deeper into hell. Ichigo twisted around to see the portal close a moment later, with his friends just shy of making it. Removing his mask, he shunpoed to where he could sense Zeni, only to see him collapsed on the ground, panting as Masaki tended to him with glowing hands. The demand that Ichigo had been prepared to make died in his throat. Zeni used everything he had to keep that portal open for as long as it took. It was just bad luck that no one else had managed to make it in. Ichigo, he's on the verge of dying, Masaki quickly told him. He's got to rejoin the rest of your soul or he'll just cease to exist. Ichigo nodded sharply. All right, Zeni, make it quick, hell will back in a moment. With effort, Zeni got to his feet and drew Zangetsu. You know how this goes, right? Ichigo snorted. Seeing Zeni's grip tremble with lack of strength, Ichigo gently helped raise Zeni's blade to his heart. Masaki gasped, but they ignored her as, together, they pushed Zangetsu into his heart. There was no pain. There couldn't be. Zeni and his version of Zangetsu began to dissolve as his spirit returned to Ichigo's heart. Zeni could not help but smile. I'm home. Ichigo smiled back. Ah, welcome home. Let's protect everyone together. Zeni nodded, and then his form was no more. You know, you and your friends have become very, very annoying, Ayumu's voice growled as he appeared a short distance away. Not only did you succeed in bringing me back here, but your friends have managed to shore up the gates enough to temporarily seal the hole you made in them. That woman is naturally going to reverse the reishi resonance as well, meaning days more work recreating it. Ichigo smirked, pleased at that news. Good to hear. Of course, she'll need time to reverse it. And strong as they are, your friend's reinforcements to the gates are temporary and not sufficient to keep me here permanently. Once you're out of the way, I can break them at my leisure. Well, that just means I should finish with you first, Ichigo replied calmly, reaching for his hollow power. He was engulfed in black Reiatsu for a few moments before it faded, revealing him in his resurrection once more. HMPH. Let's see if you can. Chapter 76. To destroy a god. Blood flew in countless directions as screams tore through the air. The ash skeletons were without pain, without remorse, without mercy as they continued to rip through the army of Togobito that hell had summoned. Some of the ash skeletons had been destroyed, but there were simply too many for the Togobito to handle. The ones with the best success were those who had powerful enough ranged attacks, but Yamamoto knew that they too would perish shortly. Hell had done little but run, avoiding Yamamoto's every technique. It was highly annoying, Yamamoto had to admit. Hado 58. Tenrin. He barked, spinning Zenka no Tachi and unleashing a massive blast of fire, strengthened even more by the tornado-like blast of wind. As expected, Hell vanished from the area just before fire turned all the sand in that area to ash, and Yamamoto followed him as quickly as he could. Hell was consistently just a bit faster than him. It vaguely reminded Yamamoto of Shihoin Yoruichi's favorite training game, Ho-Ho Tag. He had witnessed Yoruichi and a young Kuchiki Byakuya at that game frequently before Yoruichi had been banished. Disturbingly, he realized that put Yamamoto in the position of Kuchiki. Well, that wouldn't do. It was time to change tactics. He had to either make the whole battlefield harmful to Hell, which wasn't practical, since Yamamoto's Raryoku did have a limit at some point and he needed to conserve some for sealing Hell, or he had to lure Hell into a trap. He frowned in consideration, absently throwing another concentrated slash of fire at Hell to keep him occupied. Perhaps a large Tozansho. It would certainly limit the battlefield, but Yamamoto doubted that he could catch Hell in it. A continuous onslaught of Hyapurankan. No, it was too easy to dodge. A collection of Suriboshi, with a tweak to make the material a trap. No, not enough sturdy objects to attach to. But perhaps, Yamamoto let out a fierce grin. Quite suddenly, Hell realized he couldn't sense Yamamoto anymore. He paused for a moment and looked around. The ash skeletons were still present slaughtering his army, so Yamamoto wasn't dead. But the heat from his presence was gone. His Reiatsu seemed to have disappeared entirely. And Hell couldn't see him anywhere. Had Yamamoto actually retreated from the battlefield? Hell frowned. No, that made no sense. Yamamoto was completely dominating this so-called fight. Hell hadn't even managed to land a single blow on him, and Asahi no Kagami had been quite damaged by his heat aura. Why would Yamamoto retreat? Perhaps he was running low on Raryoku. Or perhaps he was hiding, waiting for an opportunity since it was obvious that Hell could evade all of Yamamoto's attacks. Hell nodded to himself thoughtfully. Yes, that last one made sense. No point in wasting Raryoku when it served no purpose. If this became a battle of attrition, Hell had the advantage, and both of them knew it. So Yamamoto had to be hiding somewhere nearby, waiting for Hell to let his guard down. Hell extended his senses, trying to work out where the old man had gone. Not there, nor there, not over there either, damn Yamamoto, Hell grumbled. Not enough to have a godlike Bankai and powerful spells, no. He just had to branch out, just had to master invisibility as well. Wouldn't surprise me if he had some ultimate seal too. Yamamoto silently cancelled his invisibility spell, Kyoko, from right behind Hell. Well, since you asked, Kuyo Shibari. Hell flinched for the barest of moments, but it was enough for 8 black holes to materialize around him, paralyzing him long enough for a 9th to appear in his chest. Raikujokuro, Seijo Sabaku, Yamamoto cast almost absently, further binding Hell with another 2 powerful Bakudo. Hell swore under his breath as he struggled to shake off the spells. He really shouldn't have tempted fate. Yamamoto smiled tightly, but placed a hand over Hell's head and began the incantation. Limit of the 1,000 blades, dutiful blades, unable to slay the enemy. The darkness of the void, the concept of fear, the absence of reason when they meet, come forth. Hell's eyes widened as complete darkness fell upon them. There was nothing to see, nothing to hear, nothing at all beyond Yamamoto and himself. He fell silent, studying the technique, looking for flaws even as he awaited the inevitable. A mortal body, absolute restraint, the wheel of time halts. With pure purpose I declare. Boidoburido Kugyo. Hell cried out as invisible, immaterial swords stabbed into him in all of his wrists, his ankles, his elbows and knees, all of joints in short succession, and then right next to his heart. A terrible cold rushed through his system, and abruptly he realized he could not move at all. Not even his jaw or his tongue would respond to him. How could a god of fire possibly be able to use such deathly cold? Then he realized, the frost in his veins was not from Yamamoto's Raryoku. It was from his own. You must have guessed it by now, Yamamoto said quietly. Boidoburido Kugyo, the Void Blade Penance. The sword in your chest has penetrated your Hakusui, the source of your power, but did not damage it. Your body will now generate merely enough Raryoku to keep the seal intact and your body alive, but as it has been touched by the seal, your Raryoku will not respond to you. No, that is not quite correct. Your soul doesn't even recognize it as your Raryoku any longer. You're thinking of escape options, I'm sure, Yamamoto continued with the same quiet confidence. You're thinking that if the sword in your chest is destroyed, then since your Hakusui is undamaged you'll be able to use your own Raryoku to destroy the remaining bindings. Did you think that even touching the Hakusui would not have consequences? The blade has entered your Hakusui, merged with it to an extent. If the seal is destroyed, then so too will your Hakusui be destroyed. If you are merely a soul fragment, as I believe, then you require a constant source of Raryoku to survive. This is why the Kusanada, your soul fragments, constantly ate Togabito yet never grew any stronger. They needed more energy to exist than their Hakusui could provide, if they had Hakusui at all. So for you, losing your Hakusui is tantamount to ceasing to exist. I do not know if you would reincarnate here in your world in such a case, nor do I know if your Hakusui would recover in that reincarnation, Yamamoto admitted. However, the point is moot, as I have left you unable to move in any conceivable way. I sentence you to eternal penance in the void, live, hell, and repent your sins. Yamamoto fell silent, and hell was left alone in the absolute void. Yamamoto looked upon his work as he stepped out of his seal and nodded to himself in satisfaction. It had taken the shape of a sword, twice as large as hell had been, whose color constantly shifted between very dark purple and black. Yamamoto picked it up by the hilt and nodded to himself. The seal was stable, now the only thing to do was to hide it somewhere, and catch up with Kurosaki. If the young man had not returned by now, there surely was something wrong. Masaki breathed deeply, gathering more and more reishi from her surroundings as her Quincy powers recovered with greater and greater speed. Only a minute or two longer, and she'd be able to support her son in the fight against hell. For the moment, she watched them clash, trying to analyze both fighters' strengths and weaknesses. Masaki watched Ichigo swing his blade, wrought in black fire, into Hell's barrier, cracking it. Ichigo had two primary strengths, his speed, and the sheer power he possessed. His weakness, however, was in how straightforward he was in fighting. There didn't seem to be a strategy to his movements beyond, get to the opponent, defend against his attacks, and cut him down with all my strength. Ichigo didn't seem to be maneuvering Hell into a corner, or setting up for a powerful technique or anything like that. Then again, Hell's barrier was truly an annoyance, Masaki decided as Hell repaired it with a gesture. Any strategy that they could concoct would depend on being able to break that barrier, or this battle had been lost before it had truly begun. Ichigo was performing the valuable if unenviable task of determining what it would take to get past that barrier. If they couldn't, then, well, normally the smart thing to do would be to retreat and get help, additional weapons, something that could make the difference. But that wasn't really an option this time. They had to stay and fight until Hell was sealed, or until the gates fully repaired themselves. Otherwise, Hell would invade the living world again. Coward, Ichigo roared, quit hiding behind that barrier and attack me. And open myself up for you to kill me. Hell retorted with a raised eyebrow. No thank you. Ichigo growled and raced towards Hell with all the speed he could muster. Hell brought up a hand, obviously channeling more power to his barrier to handle the next assault, but this time Ichigo didn't strike directly. He raced past Hell and twisted around in midair, preparing a Sero between his horns even as he flung a Getsuga Tensho at his opponent. The Getsuga slammed into the barrier, prompting a scoff from Hell. It won't work, you'll never pierce this barrier. You want piercing power, then try this on for size. Ichigo shoved his left claw forward, but instead of the crimson light of a Sero, electricity crackled at his end of his index and middle fingers. Hado 4. Byakurai. A bolt of blue-white lightning shot forward and impacted the barrier with the strength of an angry god. In an instant, the barrier shattered and the lightning lunged for its prey, carving a hole in Hell's shoulder about an inch wide. Hell stared at Ichigo in complete disbelief for a few moments, before his expression turned cold. I see. And then he flashed into high-speed movement, dashing right for Masaki. Ichigo swore and sped after him, making it just in time for Tensa Zangetsu to block Asahi no Kagami from reaching Masaki. "How dare you?" he whispered harshly, his hollow double tone making his voice sound even more menacing than it would otherwise. He channeled a Getsuga down Tensa Zangetsu, and Hell broke the deadlock and leapt back to avoid being hit. "You fought to ensure justice and peace for all souls. How dare you attack my mother?" "You young fool," Hell retorted. "It's simple enough. I kill her, and that gives me a bargaining chip with which to control you. For the sake of recreating humanity, I will commit any evil." "You're just like Aizen," Ichigo snarled. "Neither of you ever could figure out that the right path to peace didn't involve becoming that which you were fighting." "Do you think your words move me?" Hell answered coldly. "I know that there will be no place for me in the new world. Do not think me such a fool that I cannot see the consequences of my own actions." "Then you should be aware of the consequences you've just brought on yourself," Ichigo spat, flaring his Reiatsu angrily. "Back there, I was feeling pretty sympathetic. But now I just don't care. You tried to kill my mother. I will kill you, that's a promise." Masaki calmly stepped next to Ichigo, her own blue-white Reiatsu clearly visible next to his black and red. She had finally fully recovered her power, and she was ready to fight. With a simple gesture, she conjured her Quincy bow and an arrow. "You may be a god, but there is one thing that even gods should not dare to invoke lightly, a mother's wrath. To try to kill my son right in front of me, you've awakened my anger." Quincy and hollow pointed arrow and sword at Hell accusingly. "To raise your sword against my family," they cried out together, "is unforgivable." Ichigo leapt at Hell, black fire engulfing not only his blade but his entire arm as it traveled up Tensa Zangetsu's chains. Hell's eyes widened for a split second even as he created another barrier, but it stood no chance to Ichigo's rage. Tensa Zangetsu carved through the barrier like hot butter, and Hell was forced to defend with Asahi no Kagami. Roaring a battle cry, Ichigo pressed forward, using his monstrous strength to swing his Benkai blade strongly enough to send Ayumu flying. He immediately took aim with his horns and swiftly charged his power. Sero. Hell grit his teeth and created yet another barrier to block the crimson ray of destruction, but a voice to his right sent a chill down his spine. Licked region. That was all the warning Hell received before Masaki unleashed a storm of innumerable arrows. The barrier had had most of its power focused to the front to block the Sero, and was therefore no match for the unexpected assault. The barrier shattered in its entirety, and abruptly Hell was engulfed by the Sero and the swath of arrows. When the Sero faded, Hell's corpse fell to the ground. Ichigo materialized next to Masaki in a burst of sonido. "He's dead," he observed calmly as the body disintegrated. "Yes, sorry, Ichigo, I know he has to stay alive to be sealed. It's all right, he'll be back shortly." "How do you know? What if it takes him a year to come back?" Ichigo shook his head. "No, he'll be back in a matter of minutes, if not seconds. Remember how I told you about Cazador? When he beat me in my inner world, I came back within a day, and that was when I didn't know what I was doing. Ayumu, that's Hell's real name, will pull himself together much faster than I did." Perceptive, Ichigo and Masaki turned to the side, where Ayumu was brushing himself off. "Are you ready to continue?" "What do you mean, no?" Rukia, followed closely by Renji, the Vizard and Ichigo's Arrancar allies, steadfastly glared at Yoruichi. She was nervous, arguing against the goddess of Flash, but she refused to let it show. "Exactly what I said," Yoruichi told her with narrowed eyes. "You can't go through the gates to help Ichigo." She raised a hand to forestall the inevitable demands to know why, and gestured towards the still manifested gates of Hell, where Hachi and Tessai were working together, maintaining a very powerful barrier to cover the large hole that Ichigo had blasted. "The gates are damaged to the point where Hell, or Ayumu, or whatever his real name is, can escape here to the living world. If we weaken our barriers enough for you to go through, then that's an opportunity for Hell to escape, and we can't risk that. We got lucky that Ichigo was able to drag him back to the Hell dimension, and we can't count of him being able to do it again." Renji clenched his fists. "Surely there's some way we can help him." Yoruichi jerked her thumb over her shoulder, where Urahara was working feverishly, setting up a machine. "Kazuki is working on a way to communicate with everyone. Until we have contact, the most we can do is prepare for the worst. Oi, Kazuki, how are you doing over there? Almost done. Kazuki grunted, connecting a few wires and attaching what looked like a satellite dish to the top. With a singular movement, he aimed the dish right at the gates of hell. There. Now let's power it up. He vanished for a few seconds and then reappeared with a black box with a few cords dangling from it. He attached one of them to the machine in a previously unseen slot, and nodded to himself when the machine began to whir and hum. Okay, next step, connect to the right frequency, he muttered, and twisted a few dials. And, there. Grabbing a microphone that he'd left on top of the machine, he spoke directly into it. This is Urahara Kazuki from the living world. I am remotely powering your communication devices. All units in hell, respond with your current status. This is Soifun Taicho. I am with everyone save Yamamoto Sotaicho and Kurosaki. We have secured the site that Togabito were using to attack the living world. However, we are under siege by an unending number of Togabito. Do you have injured? Urahara asked quickly. No. Kotetsu Fukuteicho has performed her role of healer admirably. Good. How long can you hold the site? There was silence for a few moments. A few hours more, came the answer. Then we'll have to finish it before then. Yamamoto Sotaicho, can you hear me? I am here. Kurosaki and I separated when we encountered hell. Did he escape with his mother? Urahara furrowed his brows. When he emerged from the hell dimension, his mother was not with him, he denied. But he is currently fighting hell on the first level of the dimension. Did he escape you? No, I sealed the hell I fought. It is as I suspected. Hell's soul fragments have not reunited into a single being yet. He must have combined enough to create a second avatar. That explains the weakness of the one I sealed. Kurosaki, status. There was a pause. Like Urahara said, we're fighting him on the first level. We just killed him again, but he'll be back any second. Why are you killing him? Soifun barked. You know perfectly well that he must be sealed. Of course we know that. But Ayumu obviously knows that too, because he started putting himself in positions where if we break his protective barrier then he dies. It's very annoying. Who is Ayumu? And why are you speaking with the royal we? Ayumu is Hell's original name. I'm using it so people don't get confused between person and dimension. And it should be obvious that I'm not fighting alone. My mother and I are fighting together. Turns out she's a Quincy. Who knew? There was complete silence for a few seconds, and then everyone in the living world was treated to the sight of Ishida Ryu calmly approaching a sturdy wall and proceeding to bang his head into it repeatedly. I would ask that you keep that a secret as long as possible, Yamamoto's voice said, with only a hint of exasperation. If Kuretsuchi Taicho finds out, then I can see no scenario where he does not commit suicide by Kurosaki. Shinji instantly looked expectantly at Rose and Kensai, who begrudgingly reached into their pockets and gave him some cash. Seeing the various Shinigami give him strange looks, he only smiled more widely. Don't worry, Yamamoto Sotaicho, Urahara reassured him. I will edit the recordings of your earpieces to omit her being a Quincy. Thanks. Oh, Ayumu's back. We could use some help, though. I'm on my way. You know, being able to hear them is good and all, but isn't there some way we can see what's going on? Shinji asked Urahara. Perhaps. Let me see if my old student did as I suspect. Urahara opened a compartment of his machine, revealing a small screen and a keyboard. He typed at it for a few seconds, and then nodded. As I thought, the devices he gave them also have a forward-facing video camera. I can tap into it, but I need something to display with. He nodded again, and vanished. Several seconds later, he reappeared with another small device, connecting it to a port next to the screen. His fingers flew across the keyboard, and then the latest device he'd hooked up began to project several videos against the wall. Now to isolate the feeds we want. The number of videos displayed reduced to 2, and the remaining images enlarged to rectangles, each 3 meters wide by 2 meters tall. Urahara nodded, satisfied with his handiwork. There we go. The one on the right is from Ichigo's feed, the one on the left is Yamamoto Sotaicho. Sound is enabled as well, so you should be able to hear everything they're saying. It had been little over a minute since Shinji had asked Urahara to see what was happening in hell. He shook his head in admiration. Say what you will about him, but that mad scientist gets things done, he muttered even as he joined the others to watch the feeds. Ichigo was apparently looking at Ayumu, but his mother was caught on camera as well, being a few feet ahead of him and to the side. Mom. Appearing apparently out of nowhere, Karen and Yuzu raced to see the display better. Then Yuzu stiffened, seeing the other person on the screen. Karen, is that? Karen's eyes went white for a moment, and then she nodded. Yes, that's hell. His soul's not whole, but that's definitely hell. So that's hell, Ishin mused, following his children at a slightly more sedate pace. Behind him were the Kasumioji group. Masaki and Ichigo are fighting him, then. He asked Urahara. The scientist nodded. Yamamoto Sotaicho will be joining them shortly. Why are you here? This is the safest place to be, Ishin said simply. Everyone here is an ally of my son. There's no safer place for his sisters. The Kasumioji, I assume, are of similar mind. Kenryu and Enryu nodded firmly once to affirm the statement. Rurochio's eyes were very wide. Kurosaki-sama has this many powerful allies. Hi, Rurochio-sama, Kenryu confirmed. If you are safe from Kumoi anywhere, you are safe here. Do you understand now why we sought Kurosaki-sama's protection? Rurochio could only nod, completely in awe. Then she noticed something. So, where is Kurosaki-sama? That's him, Karen told her, pointing at Yamamoto's feed. He had just arrived, and clearly in sight was both Masaki and Ichigo's hollow form. Her eyes flashed white again, and she grimaced. Ichigo's getting frustrated. Hell's strategy is working. He's wearing Ichigo down, little by little. Ishin knelt down and looked Karen in the eyes. Anything else you can tell us? Karen met her father's gaze, and then nodded resolutely. She turned back to look at Hell and her eyes turned white once again, but this time they did not turn back. Hell has to maintain a constant effort to control the barrier around him, and if any part of the barrier is destroyed, it all goes down. The barrier appears to be no less than 20 centimeters from his body. His weapon has 2 uses remaining before it needs recharging. What about your mother? And your brother? Mom, Karen smiled as she looked at her. Mom's doing fine. She's very determined to help Ichigo, and is completely focused on the fight. She knows that Ichigo will protect her, just as Ichigo knows that she will protect him. She's got a technique going, something to improve her defense, something to do with her blood. She's confident in it. Blood Vene, Ishida supplied, approaching. It's a Quincy technique. By channeling reishi directly into one's veins, a Quincy can withstand blows that would otherwise kill a human. Its effectiveness varies by user. Your mother's blood Vene was, well, exceptional. It wouldn't surprise me if she could take a direct hit from hell and not be hurt a bit, Ishin assured his children. Wow, Mom's pretty powerful, isn't she? Yuzu asked her twin. Karen turned her eyes back to Hell. Yeah, she agreed softly. I just hope it's enough. Job will be to break the barrier and let Yamamoto Sotaicho do the sealing. Got it. Got it, Ichigo confirmed, watching Yamamoto fight Ayumu. The Sotaicho had, upon arrival, ordered him to take a rest and work out a plan with Urahara while Yamamoto kept him distracted. It was a break that Ichigo was glad to receive, as it gave him a chance to use his hollow nature to absorb some reishi from his surroundings and refill some of his reserves. Thanks, Urahara. So what's the plan, Ichigo? Masaki asked quietly. We're setting up Yamamoto for the punchline. Ichigo powered down out of Resurrection and removed his mask, reverting to Bankai. He would have powered all the way back down to Shikai, but he didn't want to give up the enhanced speed his Bankai gave him. Can you hide your presence, reduce your Reiatsu or something? Masaki nodded, and abruptly Ichigo could detect practically no Reiatsu from her. No problem. Ichigo allowed himself exactly 1 second to be jealous of his mother's ability to instantly hide her Reiatsu before taking a few moments to lower his as best he could. Okay, let's move. We've got to find an appropriate sniping spot. After a quick look around and verifying that Hell wasn't watching them, Ichigo stepped into Shunpo, and felt Masaki follow with her Renkyaku. Yamamoto allowed himself a tiny flicker of satisfaction as he saw the pair vanish. He slammed Ryujin Jaka into Ayumu's barrier again, allowing flames to engulf the two of them once again, purposely obscuring Ayumu's vision and hopefully inhibiting Ayumu's ability to sense anything beyond Yamamoto himself. Is this all you have? Ayumu asked, disappointed. How is it that you, a much more experienced Shinigami than Kurosaki, are unable to pierce my shield in any way? Is this really the most powerful Shinigami in Soul Society? You haven't begun to see my power yet, Ayumu, Yamamoto replied calmly. I was simply waiting for Kurosaki and his mother to be out of range. Bankai, Zanka no Tachi. Ayumu leapt back in caution, putting some distance between himself and the leader of Soul Society. Much better, he admitted. I was very nearly incinerated there. So this is the form that defeated my other self. Your barrier is quite strong, Yamamoto observed calmly. Able to handle even those flames. I wonder if it can handle this technique. He lunged at Hell, Zanka no Tachi ready to eradicate the barrier. Yamamoto carefully watched Hell's expression as he approached, and when Hell began to smirk he instantly changed course and instead ran just past Hell. Now, Kurosaki. On cue, an impossibly powerful arrow ripped through Hell's barrier like paper. But it was not aimed for Hell himself, but for a few centimeters away from Hell's torso. A quarter of a mile away, Masaki lowered her bow and smirked at her son. Barrier down. Ichigo couldn't help but smirk back as he moved Tensa Zangetsu away from her shoulder. Good. The idea had been simple. Ichigo had the power, Masaki had the accuracy. Just as Ichigo and Ishida had almost done against that first Manos Grande what felt like a lifetime ago, they could combine their strengths. With the barrier down, now everything depended on Yamamoto. And the old man was already in motion, firing what seemed to be all manner of binding Kido at Hell. Ropes, chains, bars of light, pillars falling from the sky, black holes, Yamamoto was conjuring anything and everything as fast as he could. The problem was that Ayumu was moving just as fast. He hadn't been disturbed in the slightest by his barrier failing, and was a blur of motion, using Asahi no Kagami to cut through Kido he couldn't dodge. By all appearance, the two appeared to be at a stalemate. Yamamoto was casting fast enough, strong enough that Ayumu couldn't take the time to create another barrier. But Ayumu wasn't letting anything hit him. Ichigo's eyes went wide. He saw his opportunity. Flickering into Shunpo and keeping his Reiatsu as low as he could, he drew the dagger that Kiraku had given him and began channeling his Raryoku into the blade. To Ichigo's utter satisfaction, Ayumu never saw him coming. The dagger broke the skin on Ayumu's back easily, and pierced the heart. Ichigo promptly threw the full might of his power into the dagger, willing the spell to do as it was designed, to shatter Ayumu's soul once again. Ayumu's mouth opened, and he spat out some blood before falling forward, falling off the dagger and collapsing onto the ground, dead. A second passed, then two, and then Ayumu's body disintegrated. Ichigo blinked and looked at the bloody dagger he now held. Did it work? He asked. Also, why is it so damn hot? The heat is due to my Bankai, Kurosaki. Keep your distance. The closer you are to me, the hotter it is. The air closest to my skin is as hot as the sun itself. The fact that you are not merely ashes on the wind from that distance speaks well of your defense, but I would rather not test it further. Ichigo swallowed. That's rather terrifying, actually. Thank you for not using it in the living world, then, when we were fighting Aizen. Of course. As for whether the dagger worked, I do not know, Yamamoto admitted. I expected something like him screaming in pain as his soul was forcibly torn apart, his whole body glowing and then hundreds of Kusanada appearing. Me too. It's possible that his soul was split into so many pieces that the fragments could not form the Kusanada, Yamamoto mused. Or it's possible that your spelled dagger did not work at all, an annoyed voice stated. Ichigo and Yamamoto turned to see Ayumu approaching, fully healed and his barrier already back up. You fools. You cannot break a soul that lives on a higher plane than yourselves. Only a god can break a god. Do you really think you can stand beside the Ryo, that you could do as he did? Until you comprehend your soul's true nature, until you know what part of your soul you are, until you have become a god, you will never be able to break me. Chapter 77. Empathy. Scowls were clearly adorning nearly everyone's face at Ayumu's return. He comes back quick, Shinji observed with narrowed eyes. Why didn't the dagger work? Kensai asked Urahara, clearly trying to wrap his mind around the idea that a spell existed that could tear a soul apart. Urahara opened his mouth to make an educated guess, but Karen beat him to it, her eyes of the oracle still active. Ayumu's Raryoku was able to resist Ichigo's because Ayumu is an existence that Ichigo doesn't comprehend. It's the same as why we can't sense Ichigo-kun's Reiatsu unless he allows us to, Urahara expanded. His soul has grown far enough down multiple paths that we truly cannot understand his existence unless we follow him down them. In the same way, how can we understand a man who became a god capable of creating his own world, of changing what happens when a soul dies? The only way to understand such a thing would be to follow his path and do so ourselves, or maybe to wield eyes such as Kurosaki-chan's. Everyone turned to look at Karen, who was steadfastly watching the feeds. So, you guessed, she said quietly, then turned around and activated her power. Her eyes turned white once more as she gazed upon the people gathered. Karen stood her ground as nearly every person there was laid bare before her. She saw Rukia's quiet feeling of helplessness stemming from once again being unable to help the man who had taken her world and shaken it until it was something that Rukia had hardly dreamed possible. She saw Urahara's feeling of vindication that he'd gotten it right, and his curiosity to the limits of her power, if there even were any. She saw Shinji's mind putting the pieces together and contemplating how to use the knowledge. She saw her father's pride in her, saw him preparing to step in should they attempt to use another of his children. She saw so much that it was impossible to wrap her mind around it all. There was too much to see, too much for her to understand at once. The most she could do with this many subjects, unless she focused on individuals, was to see their current feelings and thoughts. Karen took a deep breath, steadying herself. These eyes of mine, the eyes of the oracle, allow me to see the truth. Who you are, what you feel, your motivations, nothing is hidden from me if I turn my eyes on you. If there is something Ayumu is hiding, I will see it. I will help my brother in any way I can. Her gaze met Rurochio's. My powers do not lie in war. I don't have the strength to fight alongside my family. But I will make their burden as small as I can. If this is all I can do, then this is what I will do. The Kasumioji princess gave a small, gentle smile and the slightest of nods. Nothing needed to be said. Karen and Rurochio understood each other perfectly. Seeing that, Karen turned around to watch Hell once more, focusing the power of her eyes on her family's enemy. Yuzu, standing beside her as they watched Yamamoto and Ichigo face Ayumu, took her hand gently. Karen squeezed it, taking strength from her twin's presence. They were so different on the outside, she knew. But their hearts, their feelings were one. Yuzu was praying for the safety of Ichigo and their mom, and so was Karen. Any ideas? Ichigo asked Yamamoto, just loud enough for Yamamoto to hear him. Yamamoto remained silent for a moment, eyeing Ayumu critically. Have you improved your Bakudo? It appears I alone cannot catch him. Yeah, I've got a few Bakudo I can cast reliably. Mostly ones working with ropes or chains. That will be sufficient. This time, you engage and I will break the barrier. Then we will bind him together. Ichigo nodded resolutely. Bringing his hand up to his face, he ripped his mask into existence and reached for the well of hollow power within him. Black fire flowed swiftly up his body, and a second later he was in his resurrection form. Let's go then, he yelled, lunging for Ayumu as he charged Tensa Zangetsu with a Getsuga. It useless, Ayumu declared, dodging before flickering to another location several meters away. Then, just as Ichigo registered his new location, Ayumu flashed away again. And again, and again. Your strategy before relied on accurately piercing my barrier without killing me. As long as I move quickly enough, you will not succeed. And every time you kill me, I come back stronger. He's right, Urahara agreed, speaking to them with the interdimensional communicators. He's not a whole soul yet, but it appears he's recovered more of his soul during that last death you inflicted. Well, that's annoying, Ichigo commented, watching Hell carefully, looking for a pattern, for some hint of where he was going to be. So, you're relying on speed, then. And the idea that I don't have the speed, power and accuracy to do the job myself. Well, I'm sorry to tell you that you picked exactly the wrong opponent to try this with. How's that? You may have the power to break the barrier, but you'll have to catch me first. And you're not nearly fast enough. Surely you've noticed that my Bankai is not like other Shinigami. It compresses my power to increase my speed, strength, and Reiatsu. The more power I have, the greater the effect. There, Ichigo smirked behind his mask. He had the pattern now. So, Ayumu asked mockingly, you've been using your Bankai and your hollow powers this whole time. Have you suddenly learned how to use Quincy power-up techniques as well? Nothing like that, Ichigo admitted, bringing his left claw up to open his Bankai coat, exposing the 2 crescent moon seals over his heart, which were glowing black and white against his skin. Just a simple limiter seal. Let's see how you do against my real power. Gente Kaijo. As a pulse of black Reiatsu swept over the area, Ayumu paused for a brief instant to reevaluate his opinion of Ichigo's threat level. That instant was an instant too long, as Ichigo materialized right in front of Ayumu with a sonic boom, a Getsuga-enhanced Tensa Zangetsu already in motion to stab through the barrier. Ayumu barely managed to dodge to the side, flashing away, only to once again be cut off by Ichigo. This time, he deflected Ichigo's stab with Asahi no Kagami and lashed out with a kick, sending Ichigo back a few feet. I admit, I underestimated you. At my current strength, you will inevitably catch me and break the barrier. However, you have forgotten one thing. And what that? I recover more of my soul every time I meet my demise. And there is nothing stopping me from killing myself. In a single, swift motion, Ayumu flipped Asahi Kagami around and cut his own head off. Ichigo watched in stunned disbelief as Ayumu's corpse fell to the ground, bleeding for several seconds before disappearing. You have got to be kidding me, he muttered. This is like Aizen all over again. He tapped his communicator. Guys, ideas. The other parts of his soul, the Kushinaga, must be stored somewhere for easy slaughter, Urahara spoke quickly. His lieutenants are likely able to detect his death and are killing the Kushinaga within the time frame for the soul fragments to rejoin. Soifun Taicho, Zaraki Taicho, you are to locate and eliminate the lieutenants, Yamamoto immediately ordered. Do not kill the Kushinaga if it can be avoided. Everyone else remain at the portal site. Hi, in the meantime, we'll just have to deal with Ayumu with whatever strength he's got now, Ichigo said with a groan. This is going to suck. You have no idea, Ayumu agreed as he appeared before Ichigo once again. Now that I've seen your full strength, I am satisfied. With a little more training, I believe you could stand against the Ryo's guard. Now I need you out of the way for a while. He raised Asahi no Kagami, and it shone brightly for a moment. An instant later, Ichigo was once again surrounded by illusions. He immediately extended his senses, trying to locate Ayumu, but the King of Hell had apparently set his Reiatsu to its evolved state, making it impossible for Ichigo to sense him. Urahara, where is he? He appears to have fled, with Yamamoto Sotaicho and your mother in pursuit. I assume you have been hit by one of Ayumu's illusions. Break it, and then follow. Thoroughly fed up, Ichigo flared his Reiatsu. Enough of the goddamn illusions already. What more can you throw at me? You've already covered pride, trust, self-worth, guilt and betrayal. How can you condemn me for trying to do the same thing you were on a grander scale? Ayumu asked calmly. It was obviously an illusion, as it had no barrier shimmering to protect it. You want to eventually build your own world, a haven for your family and friends. Isn't it selfish to restrict heaven to those you know? I'm trying to make heaven on earth for everyone. It's not my fault that humans have to change to make that happen. And if you succeed, what then? Ichigo snarled. What then could humanity possibly aspire to? If everything is perfect, then why bother thinking at all? How could we possibly improve upon ourselves if we believe the world is perfect as it is? And what of your world? Ayumu pointed out with narrowed eyes. For all your criticism of my plan, yours is hardly any better. An illusion of Ichigo himself stepped beside the King of Hell, who nodded at him. Our name is Ichigo. Dad said it meant, he who protects. We often said it came from Ichi, for first prize, and Go, for guardian angel. Ichigo, number one guardian. But we can't be everywhere, can we? We can't protect everyone if they're in different places. We learned that when trying to save Mom, Karen and Yuzu sent them to hell. Obviously the answer is to keep them in a safe place, Zani mused aloud. Which is why you thought of making a world to begin with. What are you going to do, Ichigo? Masaki asked softly. You know that I can't just let people suffer if it's in my power to help them. Even if you make your world, you know I won't stay there. Will you force us? Ishin questioned soberly. You know that we don't have the power to stop you. If you put your foot down, we would have no choice. What about our lives? Our friends? All the ties we have to the living world? Yuzu asked with a slightly choked sound in her voice. I don't want to leave it all behind. But then, how can you keep us safe? Karen voiced Ichigo's own feelings. The only other way you can think of is Ayumu's way, by changing all of humanity. Are you really so different? All Ayumu wants to do is protect humanity, just like you want to protect us. Enough, Ichigo whispered, his voice pained. That is what I wanted as well, a vision of Aizen spoke up, standing next to Ayumu. Sacrifices must be made for peace. Anything worth having has a price. Was it so wrong that I wanted to turn Soul Society into a real heaven, one where souls who died painfully may find hope and peace instead of being forced to live in the more lawless places in the Rukongai? 100,000 souls for the Okayan, in exchange for heaven for all. Doesn't that seem like a reasonable trade? You traded the people of the Rukongai in exchange for Karakura town's safety, Yukitake reminded him. And when you made that deal with Aizen, you intended to keep it. Nameless strangers would die, but you would be able to keep the bonds you had held precious. So what makes you different from them? Soifun demanded sharply. From Aizen and Ayumu. Aizen wanted to create a utopia for Soul Society. Ayumu wants to create a utopia for all the worlds. You want to create a utopia for your family and friends. The only difference between you all is the matter of scale. Why are you right, and they wrong? Please, Ichigo breathed. Enough. I get it. I know that eventually, Karen and Yuzu won't need or want me to protect them. I wouldn't dream of forcing mom or dad into anything. I know that Ayumu is doing what he thinks is right, that he's pursuing the only option that he can see. I know that Aizen did the same. I know I am doing the same. I know we're so alike in some ways. But even so, even though I understood Aizen, I couldn't let him kill innocent people. The same thing applies to Ayumu. And if I ever end up like that, then I pray someone does for me what I do for them. The concept you're using is empathy. And just like that, the illusions vanished, leaving Ichigo standing alone. Concept you're using is empathy. Everything was silent for a moment. Then, finally, Shinji spoke up. Well, damn, Ayumu's forced Ichigo to empathize with him. He knows what he's doing. Urahara nodded. Emotional manipulation. Even though Ichigo knows that's what Ayumu's doing, that doesn't mean it's not working. Ichigo can't afford to hesitate when he fights Ayumu again. Dad, why wouldn't we want Ichi-ni to protect us? Yuzu asked her father, biting her lip. Ishin knelt and ruffled her hair gently. It's part of growing up. Someday soon you'll want to do things on your own, to live your own life and take care of your own problems. He threw a meaningful glance over at Karen before returning his gaze to his other daughter. Life for most people never really gets any easier, Yuzu. You won't be 11 forever. As you get older, more and more responsibility will be put on you. You might resent it, you might appreciate it, but your priorities will change as you mature into a beautiful young woman. In time, you might find his, and my, presence stifling, or maybe you'll feel like we don't trust you to come to us if you do need help. That's natural. Ichigo knows that that day will come, and knows that when it does he'll have to step back for your own happiness. Seeing Yuzu's uncomprehending face, he smiled and shook his head. I don't expect you to get it just yet, but remember that we're here for you, all right? Yuzu nodded silently, returning her attention back to her brother, who was reaching up to tap the communication device he wore in his ear. Yamamoto, where are you? We followed Ayumu into the desert level. I have used Bakudo 26, Kyoko to render your mother invisible, and she is preparing an attack. Have you escaped the illusion? Yeah, sorry about that, it was unavoidable. I do not expect one as young as yourself to be completely at peace with yourself. Urahara watched the feed as Ichigo began shunpoing down to rejoin the fight. Ichigo, with any luck Ayumu isn't aware of how quickly you threw off the illusion. Try to remain hidden. Yamamoto Sotaicho, are you able to break the barrier without killing him? Yes, when I give the signal, do so. Ichigo, at that moment you need to use your strongest Bakudo. Got it, Ichigo acknowledged. Yamamoto was playing it cool, Ayumu noted. The Sotaicho had reverted to Shikai and was constantly probing Ayumu's defenses with fire. Every other second or so, Yamamoto was casting purple concentrated flame spells at the most evident weak point, severely cracking the barrier but not breaking it. What was he up to? So, you sealed my other self on this level, Ayumu observed, breaking the silence. I can sense his seal. Quite impressive, really. When I finish killing you, I'll have you be the one to seal the Ryo. It'd be inconvenient for him to die, but he's in the way. Sealing him is an elegant solution. Yamamoto remained silent, continuing his repetitive yet ultimately useless work. You do realize that one definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Ayumu pointed out, unless you do something different, you're not going to get through my barrier. All you're doing is wearing yourself out. Why do you not use your Bankai? Still Yamamoto said nothing. Ayumu's lips twitched downwards. Are you really so determined not to speak with me? Finally, Yamamoto opened his mouth. It's pointless to say something if you already know it. It's counterproductive to explain the purpose of my actions to you. You already know why I do not use my Bankai. And if you do not know the reasons behind my actions, then I shall not tell you. It is true that I know why you are not using your Bankai, Ayumu mused aloud. The intense heat it creates, your Bankai is designed to utterly destroy your enemies. That makes it worthless against me, as you do not want to kill me on accident. But what could be your purpose, attacking my barrier but not breaking through? Without warning, Yamamoto flashed into Shunpo and reappeared behind Ayumu, his spare hand crackling with electricity. Byakurai. Ayumu was taken by surprise, but still managed to evade the bolt of lightning easily enough. But he was completely unprepared for the powerful arrow that shot through his barrier on his other side a split second later. 4 chains lashed out from behind and wrapped up Ayumu from his thighs to his shoulders. Ayumu twisted his head to see Ichigo in resurrection form, the chains held in his left hand. Ichigo channeled more and more Raryoku to his chains, struggling to keep them whole as Ayumu tried to break through with sheer brute strength. Yamamoto, hurry! Raikujokuro. Even as the 6 bars of light impacted Ayumu's midsection, Yamamoto was already in action. The Sotaicho stabbed Ryujin Jaka into the ground and formed a hand seal. Bakudo 99. Banken. First song. Shiryu. Second song. Hyakurensen. The white fabric conjured by Yamamoto's Bakudo wrapped around Ayumu, covering him from head to toe just in time for the cloud of metal bolts created by Hyakurensen to impale Ayumu. Final song. Banken Teiho. A giant metal cube materialized above Ayumu and began to fall, only to suddenly explode, sending metal shrapnel flying in many directions. Oh, for fuck's sake, what now? Ichigo groaned. You must be Kurosaki Ichigo and Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni, Ayumu's voice came from above. Yamamoto grit his teeth, spotting the origin of the voice. Another avatar, he snarled. Kurosaki, seal the one we have as well as you can. I'll keep this one busy. Ah, I think not. Yet another Ayumu appeared out of nowhere and with a slash of Asahi no Kagami, the avatar that they had captured was freed from the fabric and chains that had ensnared him. You have got to be kidding me, Ichigo commented, completely exasperated as he leapt back and tried to figure out what to do next. 3 Ayumus. Did you really think I would stop at one? Spare me. The almost captured Ayumu asked mockingly. One of us for each of you, and a spare to unseal us if we were beaten, another explained as the third one landed next to them. By the way, Yamamoto, that seal you used on me was truly something special. I'll see if I can give you an experience equally pleasant. Yamamoto, Ichigo, Urahara's voice said urgently. The 3 here comprise the entirety of Ayumu's soul. Yamamoto and Ichigo shared a glance. With all the trouble they had with one Ayumu, each of them knew that if there were 3 working together it would be nigh impossible to succeed. But if there were just one, even if that one were 3 times as strong, then there was a chance. They had to kill all 3 Ayumus at once. Ichigo wasn't sure he was capable of it, but he could see in Yamamoto's eyes that the old man had an idea. Ichigo nodded, ready to support Yamamoto as best he could. Yamamoto's lips twisted into a grim smile. Bankai, Zanka no Tachi. Ichigo was forced to take a step back from the sudden rush of superheated air, but cut his hand lightly as a Sero spiraled into existence between his horns. A few drops of blood floated swiftly up to the Sero, and Ichigo prepared himself to fire a Gran Rei Sero even as he began spinning tenses on Jetsu by the chain, charging up a Getsuga. Yamamoto lightly stuck Zenka no Tachi into the ground, and the Ayumuhu had been sealed by him paled slightly. But it was too late. Zenka no Tachi, south, Kaka Jumanokushi Daisojin. The ground opened, and once again thousands and thousands of ash skeletons stood upon the desert of the damned. Yamamoto pointed Zenka no Tachi at the three Ayumas. Hold them down, he commanded, and the undead surged in like the tide, bony hands made of ash gripping ankles, arms. The various avatars were very quick about dispatching them, but sheer numbers ensured that they were unable to escape. Now, Kurosaki. Ichigo's eyes had gone very wide, but he was ready when Yamamoto called his name. Hollow and Shinigami lunged at the avatars of hell, techniques at the ready. Zenka no Tachi, north, Tenchi Kaijin. Gran Rei Sero, Getsuga Tensho. The barriers that all three Ayumas conjured were wiped away as if they were nothing behind the sheer destructive force of the most powerful Shinigami and Vizard team. When the sand settled, Ichigo breathed a sigh of relief. All three had been killed in one shot. What is that? Yamamoto demanded, pointing at a rather large hole in space. It was closing slowly, but Ichigo immediately knew what it was. That's a tear in the fabric of the space-time, he said slowly. It happens sometimes when I use Gran Rei Sero. Yamamoto nodded, but there was a calculating look in his eyes that had Ichigo a little worried. How many more times can you use it? Ichigo checked his reserves. I could use it another 2 or 3 times in short succession and still be able to fight. But if I'm given a few minutes to recover some Raryoku between shots, I could fire as many as you want. I'm able to recover my Raryoku by absorbing some of the Reishi in the environment. Pretty sure it's a combination of my Quincy heritage and hollow powers. Yamamoto nodded again. Kurosaki, I want you to use your Gran Rei Sero as frequently as you can. The Hell Dimension is Ayumu's world. He is linked to it intrinsically. Put simply, damaging the fabric of his world means damaging his soul. At worst it will be an unwelcome distraction. At best, it could give him crippling pain, enough so that we could seal him. Ichigo nodded with a fierce grin behind his mask. Got it, I can do that. Well done, Ayumu greeted lightly, stepping forward with Asahi no Kagami at the ready and a barrier already conjured. You managed to kill all 3 of me at once. You do realize I was expecting you to finish unifying my soul. It was truly your only choice. Why do you think we purposely stood next to our other selves? Now I have a grasp of your most destructive techniques. So what? So it means that they will not harm me anymore, Ayumu replied. With a gesture towards his body, he materialized the same armor that Zuni had been wearing during his later fights with Ichigo. I created this armor eons ago. It negates spiritual attacks that the bearer understands. The more I understand them, the better the negation. For Zuni, who understood the Getsuga Tensho completely, your Getsuga was worthless, he continued, gesturing towards Ichigo offhandedly. For me, this armor is the ultimate expression of the power behind empathy. Now that I understand your techniques, they cannot harm me. Please, feel free to take a few minutes. I'm interested to see what plan you can come up with. Ichigo scowled behind the mask. This could be very, very bad. We've got to get that armor off of him, he muttered. I concur, Yamamoto murmured. Have you any ideas? A random, insane thought ran through Ichigo's head. He highly doubted the possibility, but there was always a chance that some idiot had created it. Oh, I know I'm gonna regret asking this, I don't suppose there's a Kido to remove clothing or armor. It was a mark of how serious the situation was that not one of the assembled people in the living world made a joke about other reasons Ichigo might want to know a clothes removal Kido. They watched tensely through Ichigo's feed, praying that the answer was yes. Yamamoto merely stared disbelievingly at Ichigo for a second, but sighed. With the number of eccentric Shinigami in the Gotei and the Kido Corps, I do not doubt its existence. However, I have never had reason to learn such a thing. With an exasperated growl, Yoruichi flashed up to machine where Urahara was waiting, microphone in hand. The scientist gave it to her wordlessly. The Kido exists, Yoruichi reported. When I transform a cat, my clothes don't change with me. Kazuki helped me learn a clothes destruction Kido to handle it. Bad news is that it's not something I can teach you in the span of a few minutes. Keep him busy, boys. I'll be there shortly. Shoving the microphone back at Kazuki, Yoruichi vanished and reappeared right in front of the barrier being maintained by the two Kido masters. Tessai glanced back at Urahara, who nodded grimly. I'm going alone, Yoruichi said aloud, halting several of Ichigo's friends who were halfway to joining her. Unless one of you is a master-class assassin and has somehow hidden it from me, you'll only slow me down. As it is, even I will only be useful to them for one thing. Can any of you claim to be able to fight on their level? The frustrated silence said it all. Take this, Urahara said, throwing an earpiece at her. Yoruichi caught it and in one smooth motion, put it in her ear. And this, he added, lobbing a slightly larger device in her direction. It's a mobile camera. Once you reach the desert level, push the button on the side and it'll activate. It's programmed to track the largest sources of Reiatsu at a distance, allowing us to see more of what's going on. Maybe it'll see something Yamamoto or Ichigo can't, something we can use. Nodding at the scientist, Yoruichi returned her attention to the barrier. Only open it for a second, she ordered. No, 1/4 of a second. On my 3 count. 1, 2, 3. The barrier dropped for a fraction of a second. And then the goddess of flash was gone, diving into hell. Leave hell with me for the moment, Yamamoto ordered Ichigo. I will keep him occupied. Go use your Gran Rei Sero as we talked about. Right, you two sound like you have a plan, Ayumu commented. Well then, shall we begin? Ichigo flashed away just as Yamamoto thrust his hand outward. Daichi Tenyo. The desert sands lunged at Ayumu, appearing almost as a tidal wave of sand from all directions. Ayumu gave no reaction until the second he would have been crushed by the sand, at which point he carelessly swung Asahi no Kagami. The pressure behind the swing blasted away the sand easily, leaving him untouched. However, Yamamoto had been hidden in the sand, had used it to get close. Ayumu's eyes went wide. The incredibly simple spell punched right through his barrier just in time for Yamamoto to grab him by his arm and fling him unceremoniously up into the air, whereupon Yamamoto promptly shunpo-ed directly above him. Sokatsu, he bellowed, using a two-fisted punch to send Ayumu careening down into the desert. Yet the old Sotaicho was not done yet. Reikoho. Lightning crackled down his arm and then flashed down through the air, impacting Ayumu right in the chest before causing an enormous explosion. When the smoke cleared, Ayumu remained there on the desert sand, apparently unharmed, but his expression was quite clearly one of surprise. Yamamoto stood there in the air in all of his fiery glory, his Reiatsu billowing off of him. I am the Sotaicho of the Gotei 13. There is no stronger Shinigami than I. What does it matter if you understand one technique? I have dozens, hundreds of techniques that I have mastered in the millennia I have lived. Your armor may have saved you from my flame, but do not presume to think that you have defeated me. Just then, a Gran Rei Sero fired nearby. Ayumu winced and clutched his heart, and Yamamoto allowed himself a ferocious smile. I may not succeed in sealing you, but I will keep you from getting to Kurosaki Ichigo. I will buy him the time he needs to tear your soul apart. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.